Hello and welcome to Experiential Realism. Today I have my good friend Scott Williamson from the Discussion podcast back on the show as promised, and we're going to be discussing Christianity, consciousness, idealism, materialism, and also we're going to go over his debate with an evangelist called Christopher. I can't even remember his name. He spoke to someone called Christopher Johnson, which is the founder of Creation Liberty Evangelism and the author of the book Wolves in Costume, Kent Hovind, where he exposes the false teachings of Hovind, who is also a Christian fundamentalist. So, yeah, we're going to go over that debate and we're going to discuss Christian apologetics and all things metaphysical. And I give you right now Scott Williamson of the Discussion podcast, my very good friend. Here we go. Hi, Scott. How's it going?
That's
Yeah, sorry,
going.
I was just recording a quick intro
Oh,
before you
okay.
came in, and it's recording right now. So I don't know if you want me to pause to hit pause because I didn't have time, or if you want to just continue with the discussion, you're quite happy to do that, or
Yeah, yeah. Either way, I'm good.
yeah. I'll tell you what, I can barely hear you, so let me just go to volume. Uh,
Let me make sure my.
yeah, it's
Let me
it's
make sure I'm turned up all the way. Hold on, I might have turned myself. Here we go. Is that any better?
yeah, that's all right. Yeah, that's reasonable. I think we can have a conversation like that. Yeah, actually, we've already been talking on your show about, metaphysics, consciousness, experiential realism, and we also had a very interesting guest at the beginning. And I
Yeah,
hope that guy's all right, because
yeah. I hope he is too. He didn't seem too well, but hopefully he'll be okay though.
yeah, yeah, because it reminds me of of mental health, which is also part of this experiential reality. And something that everyone should take seriously because it's an invisible disease, isn't it? We can't see it. People have their own issues in their heads, and we can only see the outward appearance, and we think that they're okay, that everything's fine, but there's a lot more going on in their heads, and yeah, and that was unfortunate because the guy burst into tears, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He did, and that was not a good sign.
Definitely not.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
felt sorry for the guy.
so did
I
I.
guess he, I guess he kind of felt that at home, talking about this stuff, he felt like it was a safe place to dial in and call in for whatever reason to express himself. So hopefully it helped him in some way. I don't know.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I hope he wasn't because I think he was talking about himself when he was referring to a janitor, wasn't he?
Yeah, I was trying to figure that out. Like, is he talking about? Because he asked me, have I heard about what happened to the janitor at school? So I was thinking he's referring to some news story or something like that.
Yeah,
And then I started putting it together, and it sounded like he was
the
talking
penny
about
dropped.
himself.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. No, I hope he's okay. I mean, in my head, I was laughing at times because it is a bit funny, but at the same time, it is quite serious. It's a big issue. I mean,
mm,
it's a terrible situation to be in because sometimes and I think he mentioned it wasn't just depression, it was also schizophrenia, wasn't it?
yeah,
And that can massively distort your perception of reality, the objective reality that we can all agree on. And yeah, and I could tell that
Well,
he was
I'm God in
self-medicating
drag.
in front of all of us. He got his
Yeah,
pipe out. He was taking
yeah,
hits
he
and getting
was.
high, wasn't he?
I mean, I consider myself God in drag, but I don't know if am I schizophrenic. Maybe
Yeah,
God is a schizophrenic.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, good luck to him,
Yeah.
And it actually reminds me of, the conflation that Chris brought up during the debate
Hmm.
with you. Chris Johnson, isn't it? Christopher
Yep.
Johnson,
Yep.
um, where he conflated knowledge with, the knowing of consciousness. And I'm thinking in the case of people who suffer with schizophrenia, the knowing is there, but they can't be sure about the knowledge of objective reality that everyone can agree on. They have a problem with that, don't they? But it's almost like it's similar to a brain in a vat scenario
Hmm.
where they can't be sure of the appearances, but they can be sure that they're having a conscious experience.
Hmm.
And I think that's something that Christopher struggled with, didn't he? He struggled with the brain in a vat.
There
And he
there
also,
was a point. Yeah, there
yeah,
was a point where he kind of gave it away because he was like saying, "Well, you're just going in a circle," and he was that's what he was telling me, and and I was saying, "No, we can be uncertain about anything else, like our attributions and our thoughts, and the content or the nature of our thoughts or the nature of consciousness or any of the topics we're discussing. But the one thing we can't deny is that we're having an experience. That much is undeniable." And he was saying, "Oh, you can deny it. You're telling me I can't deny it." So then he was confusing his personal rights as an individual with the point that I was trying to make. I wasn't trying to make a legalistic point, like you're not allowed to question that. That's not what I meant. That was kind of disingenuous. But then also he said we could be mystics floating on a mystical cloud as souls or beings of light somewhere, or we could be something else. This just demonstrates that you don't know. You're self refuting. I'm like, no. Now you're conflating the attribution with the experience. This is exactly what I'm talking about.
yeah,
Like we can, maybe imagine we're just beings of light within a
yeah,
mystical mist or cloud or whatever he was trying to say. And we can actually derive that attribution, but that would be the product of a limited imagination or a limited mind. But it would not be the product necessarily of an observer because the observer is neutral. It's just looking at these thoughts and these attributions and witnessing them silently. And that's
yeah,
what we're really referring to as the basis of mentality and
yeah.
knowledge and everything else. But he didn't seem to get that or want to get it, understand it.
No, I think he massively misunderstood the concept of idealism. I mean, you could clearly tell when he um, said to Sophia, "You mean your own mind? Everything depends on your own mind." He was making the
Mm-hmm.
conflation between solipsism and
Solipsism.
idealism. And the thing is, and he was also saying, how do you know you haven't come into existence about 10 minutes ago? But the thing is,
Right.
even if you have the impression that you only came into existence 10 minutes ago, or if you came into existence 10 minutes ago according to the perceptions of other people, but you have the impression that you have lived for years, say you've lived
Mm-hmm.
for 30 or 40 years, your whole lifetime, that experience that you have is real to you. That's your
Yeah.
reality, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think
Exactly.
people don't understand that.
They don't. And a
They
lot of
fail
his
to understand that,
followers,
yeah,
yeah, if you
consciousness
notice,
transcends
yeah,
time. The
yes,
experience of time. It's all about experiences, really. Yeah, go for it.
that's right. And you notice that in the comments section, a lot of the folks were trying to say, "Oh, he was smarter than all y'all," and stuff like that. And you can't justify your belief that you're having a conscious experience. It's you're being circular. He was right. And it's like, do these people? I think they just have that blind spot. They, experience is their blind spot.
Definitely.
All
Yeah,
it is.
it's
And
it's so weird because it it there you go. It's the failure to understand that in order to be mistaken about anything, you require consciousness. You require a
that's
mind
right.
to be mistaken about your own experiences. It's not that it's not that we can be sure about the very nature of those experiences. It's the fact that we can be sure that we're having an experience itself. The interpretations is a different story. I mean, you can have multiple interpretations of what you experience. You can deem it to be just an illusion, or you can deem it to be absolute reality, or you might think, oh, I think I'm seeing a rope, but it could be a snake. It could lead to so many
Hmm.
thoughts. But the
Yeah, yeah.
undeniability comes in with the fact that you are having an experience, regardless of what that might be, you are having an experience, period. It's consciousness. How can you deny consciousness?
I think you hit on something really good for me as a future reference, that I'm going to use. I'm going to reference you here because one thing that I like that you just did is you just asked the question, and I was imagining maybe if I'd have handled it different, rather than trying to go into an explanation and try to put it together for them, maybe just ask the question and then let it explain itself. Like you just said, but if you, whether you believe or don't believe in that, it requires consciousness, doesn't it? And then leave it on him to answer,
Yeah,
because then he'll see the absurdity to the contrary,
yeah,
um, in the answer, which will lead to where I'm trying to really draw everybody to. I'm trying to draw them to that point. So rather than me speak so many words about it and just open up, semantic exploitation, like,
yeah,
oh, that's why he avoids it, because I'm talking too much. He gets to then pick what words he can dissect, because he's one of those semantic exploiters. He's one of those people that, well, what do you mean by knowledge? What do you mean by nature? What do you
yeah,
mean by entail? What do you mean by, instead of giving him the opportunity to deflect, just ask him a question that's pretty rhetorical, like you just asked, like,
yeah,
okay, well, whether I'm right or wrong about that, wouldn't it require me to be conscious to begin with? And
yeah.
then,
So in a
of
way,
course, he'll say
through
yes. So
rhetorical
he's, yeah,
questioning, make him realize the error of his ways, make him realize his own absurdity. And actually, you brought up a term, gish galloping. And the thing is, I
Gish Gallop,
think
yeah,
I think he himself was employing the technique
yeah,
of gish
yes, he
galloping
was,
in order to give you a
yep,
cognitive overload, to try and,
yep,
you know, uh, divert you away from your train of thought, because you were trying to express your own thoughts, your own concepts. And I feel like he was just creating fires for you to put out constantly. And by the time you try to
hmm,
get back to your own subject matter, what you want to focus on, um, you're already lost. You've already lost your train of thought because he's asking so many questions. It's almost like a child.
hmm,
Why this? Why that? Why? And to the point where, he's even asking, what was it? What do you mean by solid? Or what do you mean by,
yeah,
it's just so many things. And it's like, well, what do you think solid means, mate? That it's
right.
solid
It has
means the
a
impression.
standalone existence.
Yeah, it's because in reality we have attractive forces and we have repelling forces, and the forces that repel are the ones that give us the impression of solidity, is how we derive our concept of solidity, really. So there you go. That's how solidity comes about. And it's not liquid and it's not gaseous. It's something solid. It's something concrete in experience.
The laziness of the precept argument
Yeah,
is to say, okay, I can agree with all of that, but the reason I know it is because of God. So they can just agree with anything you say, and then they'll just say, well, I agree with what you agree with. The only difference is I have a grounding for it and you don't.
Yeah.
Your grounding is subjectivity, which doesn't mean anything. Experience, personal, private experience is not valid. But I'm valid because I'm pointing outside of my subjectivity to ground it into God, which is an objective object, an objective standard of morality, of knowledge, of this and that. And the other thing that he really fell flat on was the fact that, according to his definition of God, which comes out of the Bible, God is a subject. God has his own nature separate from ours. So if morality and everything comes from God, then morality is not ultimately objective. It's ultimately subjective.
Subjective. Because
And
it
I
begins with the
even granted
subject.
him. I said you could argue that it's objective to us, but it's only because you subjectively granted God as your chosen standard. Like, whether I exist or not, Arlindo will still be here with your own thoughts and ideas and imagination, whether I exist or not. So objectively, your private experience is an objective fact. But from your point of view, it's subject because it comes from within you. And it's only if I was to say, Arlindo is my standard of right and wrong, it would be that whatever Arlindo says is right and wrong, I have to agree with it because he's my standard.
Yeah.
So objectively, yeah. So I could say that, yeah, Arlindo is the objective morality, but ultimately, that just means morality is subjective because it
Yeah.
comes from Arlindo.
Yeah.
It doesn't come from some outside thing that he can never point to and never did and never tried to. He
And
just
the
tried
thing
to.
is, but when you speak of objective morality, when you speak of objectivity, that concept can exist and is applicable only to the extent that it's relational. So, for example, if I
Yeah.
have my own morality and you disagree with it, you disagree with how I comport myself, and you disagree with my opinions on what's right and what's wrong, right? I have my own ethics, you have your own. From your perspective, my morality is objective. But
Mm-hmm.
if you take into account that I'm also a sentient being, that I also have consciousness, I have a mind of my own, then you might say something like, try to use your subjectivity to find out where I'm coming from. And right there, you're also acknowledging that from my perspective, my own morality is subjective. So it the same thing applies with his worldview, where he says that God is an objective force. Uh, but if we're created in his image, according to Christianity, right, we're all made in the image of God. Isn't that what they say? Then if we're subjects, then so is God, because we're made in his image, his likeness. And
Mm-hmm.
his subjectivity might be different from ours, or it might be something like ours but beyond us. It's still subjective. It's still going to use a kind of consciousness that can discern between what's good and bad. It has that kind of knowledge. Um, Hypothetically speaking, of course, we don't know if such a God apart from us truly exists. But if we grant that position, it would have to be conscious. Otherwise, what good is he? You know?
Right. And in the, another way to put it, in the categories of philosophy and logic, you've got the objective and the subjective, and we parse these out and we define them, according to how we think about these different aspects of reality. So you could say gravity is an objective fact because it exists outside of my opinion. Everyone else can observe gravity and can feel the effects of gravity, measure gravity through the mass of planets or the mass of objects or whatever. And so you have like a fit, you're able to fit gravity as a concept into an objective category, right?
Yeah.
But but where is gravity grounded? What grounds gravity? And you'd say reality does, or nature. That's just the nature of reality, is that you have gravity. Gravity is just part of the nature of reality.
Yeah.
But where does the nature, what is also part of the nature of what we call reality, is grounded in our experience, because that's how we know it. We know gravity because we experience the effects and the measurement and the appearance of gravity, right?
Yeah.
So in that way, the God that he's talking about should be nature.
Yeah.
If there's anything that's objective, it's nature. Nature is objective.
Yeah.
The reality of nature is objective. And so God is something that exists inside of reality. If he doesn't, then you're saying God is not real.
Yeah.
But if God
That's
is
right.
within reality, then God is a derivative. And if he's a derivative, where does it come from? If we trace it back, it comes from thoughts,
Yeah.
concepts, human, specifically human concepts. You don't have cats and dogs and ants talking about God, as far as I know. This is a human construct. It's a human
Yeah.
concept, and it may be a real one. I mean, there's a lot of concepts that turned out to be real and very real, and I'm
Yeah.
not opposed to that. But until we can actually determine that, right now we can say that the morality of God must be derived from nature. If it's subjective morality
Yeah.
that you're fighting for, then you have to show where God's getting his morals from nature. And I'm not
Yeah.
sure. And then we also have, like we mentioned earlier on my show, the is ought distinction. Like, that problem exists still, because even if it's a fact that gravity exists, there's nothing in reality that says we ought to, believe it or not. There's
Yeah.
nothing in reality that says, oh, you ought not listen to or appreciate or respect gravity. There's
Yeah.
nothing in nature to tell us that one way or the other. So, it's just his whole argument is sort of like came to a semantic collapse.
Yeah.
It all sort of collapsed on itself. And it was very easy. Like, I was trying to give him the way out. Like, it's very easy. All you have to do is define your God as nature itself, which we try to do. We try to say that if you want to use the language of God without limiting it, just call it reality, existence, beingness, the greater mind or greater phenomenon of existence, of beingness. That's
Yeah.
another way you could argue for an objective standard. But he didn't want to go there, because they have a
No.
very dualistic idea of theology.
And the problem with Chris is, um, as long as he insists on defining the Christian God as this entity that lies outside space and time and beyond us, uh, he will always render it unfalsifiable from the scientific perspective, and atheists will always have the upper ground. They will always be able to say, well, the onus is on you to prove that your God
Mm-hmm.
exists, and what are your reasons for believing in such a God? You don't have any good reason, and you have failed to convince us by our standards that such a God exists. So it will always have a problem with it, and he will always come up short in trying to defend his own position. And then he will have to resort to faith. Oh, I believe in God because it says so in the Bible. Why do you believe in that? Well, why do you think the Bible is right about God? Oh, because the Bible was written by God, or the Bible is divinely inspired. And then you get into a kind of circularity, don't you? It's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
what are you trying to say then? Where's your reason? What do you ground it on? And he seems to always go back to the Bible. And then he will say things like, well, in order for morality to exist, there has to be a God, and it has to be specifically the Christian God. Um, but it begs the question, why can't human beings who are conscious creatures be able to discern what's right from wrong, or what's good and bad for them, and extrapolate, from their own experiences of good and bad, and think, well, I wouldn't like that to happen to me because it feels awful. Therefore, I'm aware that other people also have experiences, and I don't want them to go through the same thing. And the same thing applies to animals. Any sentient creature
Hmm.
capable of suffering, we don't want that for them because suffering is bad. Even if
Hmm.
suffering can guide us, pain is useful in our survival because it's a reminder for us to avoid danger. It's a signal to the brain, it's a signal to our minds that impels us to avoid danger or to find ways around this
Well,
world. But
yeah, and so the semantics that they exploit at that point is just going to be again, how do you know you can trust your thoughts that experience should be a goal worthy of protecting? Like, why would you want to protect the feelings of an animal or a person? What gives you the grounding for that without God? That's
yeah,
still your subjective opinion. And they just have this loop, this little script that brings them back to the same place.
yeah,
And it's hard to get around that as long as they are stuck. This, they always point to the epistemic circularity. And I was trying to let him know that there's only one way out of the epistemic circularity, and that's through idealism
yeah,
and non-duality. And he didn't want to believe that. And so he kept saying, no, the escape out of the circularity is God. And it's like, no, because by definition, it's a circular argument because you're saying God, therefore God. You're saying
yeah.
God, knowledge is because of God, and knowledge equals God. So you're just going in a big loop,
That's
but you
right.
don't want to acknowledge that, and you want to pretend that we're the one going on a loop because we're saying experience, therefore knowledge,
Yeah, yeah,
which leads to experience being the grounding, which
yeah,
that's totally different because again, we've got two different, all you need is two things to support your argument instead of just one. We've got experiential knowledge, which is different than knowledge. So right
yeah,
there, that's one. And then we've got logic, which is a
yeah,
derivative, which actually isn't even a derivative, as I self-corrected in the talk. I
yeah,
said, actually, I made a mistake. Actually, logic is not a derivative of phenomenal consciousness. It's entailed in it because you can't exist and not exist at the same time.
yeah,
Because if you didn't exist, you wouldn't be having an experience at all, anyways.
yeah,
So the only thing that existence can bring you is experience.
yeah,
So there's no way around it. There's no way out of
yeah,
that. So the only way to break out of that epistemic circularity is through idealism. And he didn't want to say it because, like he said, yeah, but that's a very atheistic way of looking at things. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not a defeater.
yeah,
That's just your opinion. Again, you don't like, you don't
yeah.
prefer it because of your feelings,
Yeah.
but that's not cogent.
He seems to have an extreme aversion to atheism, and the thing is, I think he's also making a conflation here. Um, when you speak of atheism, Scott, I think you speak of agnostic atheism, which is a logical position to hold. You can be agnostic about many gods. You can be agnostic. It's certainly an agnostic atheist in relation to the Christian God that he was trying to depict for you there. And I don't know why he was so averse to that. I don't know why atheism is so problematic to people like that because it's reasonable. You're not claiming that God definitely doesn't exist. You're not even
right. That's
claiming,
not right.
yeah.
Right.
You're
Right.
you're saying, well,
Bingo.
I don't have sufficient reason to think that your God exists, or I don't have sufficient reason to
Exactly.
believe in your God until I am convinced of it, until I see compelling evidence. I'm going to withhold belief. With
Right. And I could say, and the reason he kept bringing atheism into it was because, see, from his point of view as a precept, even if you believe in the Islamic God or the Mormon God or the Hindu gods, you're still an atheist.
yeah,
Because see, in his view, there's only one God. There's only one true God. and it's the Christian God. It's not even just the Christian God.
Yeah.
It's a specific Christian God. It's his interpretation of God that's the only true God. It's
Yeah.
like even the Catholics are atheists too, because
Yeah.
they're not believing in the true God. So as far as he's concerned, anybody who's not of his, you know, fashion of Christianity is not really a Christian, not really a theist, period, because they have no grounding for those ideas. Those are ideas that aren't based on the special revelation of the true God that he's received.
Yeah.
So that's their whole thing, and they try to make it foolproof to where everything locks in, and they've covered all corners, and they've stopped all holes, so there's no water leakage anywhere in their worldview.
Yeah.
And so that's why they approach it in such strict ways. But they still, their number one, their blind spot is experience, and they're just blind to that grounding. They
Yeah.
just everything's God, 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 God. You know. By the way, Logan asked, I don't see a live option on your channel, so I think he's, I don't know if he's trying to drop a live chat or what. I don't know, but I just wanted to ask you that.
Oh, there's no live option, unfortunately. Yeah, no, it's just literally, I record and then I upload it. But yeah, he's looking to join, isn't he?
Yeah,
I'd love to have
yeah.
him on. I think those guys are really cool. Logan and who's the other one? I can't remember his name. I think he's
Uh,
interviewed you before.
yeah. So Logan,
And it's the guy
who's
with the
interviewed
cap.
me?
He always wears a cap.
Oh yeah, Brooklyn Lou. Yeah, Brooklyn
Yeah,
Lou the
yeah, yeah,
skeptic.
yeah. I
Yeah,
like Lou as well. Yeah, and I couldn't wait to hear them hitch slap Christopher. To be honest, and
yeah. He did a good job.
yeah,
The one thing I like about Lou, and see, this is where this was the purpose, like where me and Sophia outlined the show. It's like good cop, bad cop. Like I play the good cop. Sophia
yeah,
plays the bad cop. Not really bad, but you know what I mean? Like someone
yeah.
who's more upfront and in your face. And
Gotcha.
then
Yeah,
I try to be the guy that keeps things, level and equal. And she plays
yeah.
the person who's, well, Lou is the bad cop. He's the guy that comes in as a guest
Right.
to, you know, and I like that. I think it's very
Yeah.
necessary.
You
And
guys bring a balance. Actually, there's a symbolism about that to do with God, where it's all very psychological. I think Jungian spotted it in conceptions of God. You always get one hand. I think the right hand points up, the left hand points down,
mhm,
or something like that. And I think the right hand is supposed to be all judgment, and the
mhm,
left hand is supposed to be mercy. And if you have a balance between the two, then it creates harmony. But if you have too
mhm.
much of one and not the other, then
Poison.
it's
Yeah.
not it doesn't benefit the target of your judgment or your mercy. If there's too much mercy, um, if you're being too merciful with someone, that person won't benefit from it. They won't prosper because they will always look for reassurance and they won't make any effort and they will sort of have a freedom to do whatever they like. It's like a carte blanche approach to life. Whereas if you're all judgment, then you can simply destroy someone. You have no empathy, no compassion. You're just all judgment, everything they do. So it's almost like a psychological balance between the two. And again, it speaks to the human mind, reaching out for some kind of balance in interpersonal relationships. You're supposed to always approach people with sensitivity, but at the same time, there has to be some tough love.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
some people are very honest and precise in their language and in their responses, and so they precisely word their responses based on your precise question.
yeah,
And so, like, I knew this one guy. There was this one guy who was a professor of philosophy and logic, and he lived in North Carolina and Chapel Hill. He taught at Chapel Hill University,
Right.
and he had tenure. He was a very smart guy. Actually, he was so smart. He was kind of weird and kind of
Eccentric, eh?
very hard to understand if you really. And he used to always ask me, how can I communicate better? Because I think I get the feeling that people don't understand me, or I run people away. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of true, because you talk and you're very precise and you use language. He goes, and I try so hard, and he loses me. And every time he talks, he has a blackboard in the background. So most of the time, he's just going to write out a bunch of stuff for you.
Yeah.
He'll say, okay, hold on, I'll answer that. There. And then you're like, what the hell does that mean? He goes, isn't it clear? P equals blah. And it's like, then he tries to explain. And if you really understand the guy, you'll finally understand he's very, very super intelligent.
Yeah.
And he makes a very logical argument, like whether you're talking about God or whatever, but it always leads to ultimately, we don't know. And he
Yeah.
always says, ultimately, like he talks about boundary constraints on any theory of mind or theory of anything. And he goes into why this is the case. And it's very intricate and stuff. So, anyways, a guy named Darth Dawkins, I don't know if you're familiar with that guy, but he's a precept apologist.
Right. I
Do
think
you
I've
know
come
that
across him
guy?
before, Come
He's a
to think
very
of it,
angry
Dawkins.
theist. Yeah, and
Right.
he's
Yeah.
very rude, and he cuts you off and he yells at you,
Yeah.
and he'll cuss you out. Like,
And it's funny that he
if,
calls himself Dawkins.
yeah, because he hates
Like
Richard
Richard Daw
Dawkins. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And so he runs his same script over and over, like, how do you know? But how do you know? And then he'll get you into a thing that'll piss you off, because he'll go, so how do you
He gish
ground
gallops.
knowledge or morality? Yeah. And then you'll answer it and you'll go, okay, how do you know that? Because this, that, okay, great. How do you know that? And so he'll just get you on this thing, and you'll finally be like, why do you keep asking me the same thing? And
Yeah.
he'll say, because you don't know. You haven't. You're coming from a no God perspective. Even if you don't call yourself an atheist, you're an atheist. Even if you call yourself just an agnostic that doesn't believe in your neutral, there is no neutrality. Because when you come to these things with a no God um, criteria, you're automatically arguing for atheism, because only when you take a God ground are you a theist, really. So even if you say, I don't know if there's God, then you're operating from a no God perspective, which
Yeah.
makes you an atheist, which makes you fall into, how do you prove your atheism is true? How do you prove there is no God? Where's your evidence
There you
there
go,
is no God?
conflating
And right,
agnostic
and then you're
atheism
like,
with
I'm not
strong
saying
atheism.
there is no God, but
Yeah.
you are saying there is no God, because you operate from a no God perspective. When you say you don't know, it just means that you're not using God as your
Yeah.
grounds for knowledge, which
And
means
there's
you're
nothing wrong with
rejecting.
saying you don't know.
Right, but he tries to conflate it and say that, that just means you hate God.
Yeah.
And so I had this guy, this real smart philosophy professor, logic professor, on, and Darth Dawkins started asking him just certain ways, and he just said, fundamentally, I don't know. And he goes, so you're telling me you're an atheist? And he goes, fundamentally, I don't know. And he's like, well, and he just kept saying that as a
Yeah.
response. And I was wondering, why is he doing that? So I asked him, and he was like, I can only answer according to the way he's asking me. I can't go and explain, because that's not what he's asking me to do. So I'm respecting him. He's trying to bully me into a short, precise answer. So I'm going to give it to him.
Yeah. You know
And it
something? I
pissed Darth
think,
Dawkins off.
I think, yeah, I think in a way, with people like Dawkins, I mean, theistic Dawkins and, people like Chris even, I think they can gish gallop to the point of dishonesty and,
Mm-hmm.
to the point of trying to derail you from your own, um, I can't really say presuppositions, but derail
train
you
of
from
thought.
your own thought processes, right?
Hmm.
But I also think you can you can question the terms that the other person uses in an honest way. Um, and for example, as much as I don't agree with everything that Jordan Peterson says, he does have a point when he says to someone, "Well, what do you mean by God?" Because I think you have
Hmm.
to lay the grounds first, the foundation, and you have to be sure of what the other person means. Like you need to be sure that they have a formulated concept of God before you can actually say, well, I think that concept is wrong, or I agree with that, or I disagree with it, or I believe in that God, or I don't believe in that. How you've presented it to me.
Right.
Um, you know,
Right.
so in a way we can be atheistic in regards to many ideas of God, but ultimately, if we're going to label God anything, and if we already have a vague notion of what that God should be, if it's to be perfect, if it's to be infinite, and all the omnis, omnipresent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, or whatever, or omni everything, even malevolence included, something that the human mind couldn't possibly comprehend. If we're going to have that, um, we can only be agnostic about that God, really. And then, and if we get to the point where we consider that maybe reality in all its totality could be God itself, we can reasonably arrive at a place where we even question the use of the or the need to use the term God. Why use the term God? Because if
Yes.
we, with
Yeah.
our limited minds, admit that we don't even understand infinity, or that we can't quite grasp infinity with our limited minds, so how can we possibly point to something and say God, even if its
Right.
existence itself including us?
And even if you take the Christian perspective, if you're playing by their rules, then you can't really claim God either. Because see, what they do is they say, like, for example, when they criticize Islam,
Yeah,
they'll say, well, Islam is self-refuting because one of the scriptures, one of the guiding principles in Islam is that God is unknowable.
yeah,
He's beyond people's knowledge to even speak on. But then the Quran also says that you have to know God and understand his commands and who he is and this and that. And he goes, and that's a contradiction.
yeah,
How can you do all of that when it's also just by principle God being unknowable? So they're atheists. They can't know God. So and that's their definition. That's
yeah,
that's what they
yeah,
said. So it creates a situation where you have to define your terms.
yeah,
And like you said, like is if you say God is that thing that's unknowable, then all you can really say is I believe in God, but I don't know if God exists because he's
yeah.
unknowable.
I think Islam has
And
the same problem as Christianity, because I think
mm-hmm,
early on there were different factions, and some of them were more mystical, and I
mm-hmm,
think Sufism is a derived from Islam, or it precedes
mm-hmm,
Islam. I can't remember it, and it's already
yeah,
mystical. And you can look
mm-hmm,
at God poetically to mean existence itself, and it's also you. And I think there's a great Sufi proverb that says, "I looked for myself and found only God. I looked for God and found only myself." But then over time, Islam became more, uh, like, what's the word? It became more imposing and more tyrannical, and it was all about conquest and
mm-hmm.
war. And some people like Sam Harris go as far as to say that Islam is a plagiarism of Judaism and Christianity. And I think he uses an example of the word virgin in Hebrew. It's supposed to be an ancient. delicacy, like a nut. And I think, and apparently the early uh, precursors of Islam, of the early Muslims, they heard Christians say the word virgin in Hebrew, and they were referring to you know they were referring to the delicacy. They were referring to the nuts that they were having. And they said
Hmm.
something like, oh, these virgins are divine. And I think it was misconstrued. So the theory goes, it was misconstrued to mean that it's really
Right.
virgins in heaven, and that when you die,
Hmm.
that's what you're gonna find. And that's how you get the Islamic belief that if a warrior dies in battle, they'll immediately bypass all judgment and reach the highest heavens where they will find, and it's usually a heaven that's pleasing to men. It's very patriarchal. They will
Oh,
find,
definitely.
70 odd virgins in heaven.
Even
And
God likes virgins. God wants virgins. Even the angels of heaven want virgins. That's why they came to the earth and created the Nephilim. And even
yeah,
God wanted a virgin so he could have his son. But the really weird thing about that is, like, if you just do any basic Google search, you'll realize that the Hebrew prophet, the whole thing was based on, I think, Isaiah's or Micah's idea, prophecy about being born of a virgin, the Messiah. For one thing, the passage wasn't even about the Messiah. It was about this one king that was going to get ambushed by this other kingdom. And it said, by the time the young girl that you consummated with, by the time that child is born, um, you know, the king is going to usher in this, that, and the other thing.
yeah,
So God was talking about a situation local to that what was going on between Babylon and Israel, and he was referring to the king who had a wife who was a young girl, because that was the word. It wasn't virgin; it was young girl, and she was to give birth to Emmanuel. God is with us. Was the meaning of the name of the word, which would symbolize the fact that Israel was going to be eventually free, and that all nations would know from its suffering and from its, that it overcame, the wolves and the language. It was just basically a poetic language, and it
yeah,
was applied to Jesus as a prophecy,
yeah,
which was based on a mistranslation. They only had the Greek Septuagint, so most people only spoke Aramaic Greek. So Jesus only spoke Greek. He didn't even speak Hebrew. He was an uneducated person. Not many
right,
people spoke Hebrew. Most people spoke Aramaic. And the Aramaic translation of the Hebrew scriptures were mistranslations in many cases. But even on that, the word virgin didn't appear. So
yeah,
it was just like they just somehow just threw it in there in order to make it fit. And then and so a lot of scholars say that the reason they went through all the trouble is because most of your Greek myths
yeah,
had their gods born of virgins and stuff like that. And so they were saying, in order to appeal to the Greek and Roman world, they wanted the theology to be more in line with the Greek thought. And so, there's a big theory that maybe Paul really started Christianity. And the reason his church won out, the reason his cult following won out, is because he appealed to the Greeks and the non-Jewish people. Because the Jewish people didn't want nothing to do with the Christianity, to be honest.
right,
Because this Yahshua guy, this Jesus guy, he wasn't a king of Israel. He
right,
failed. So he wasn't the Messiah. He wasn't a priest. He wasn't bathed in oil and all this stuff as a Messiah should be.
yeah.
He didn't fulfill any of the criteria.
He
He
wasn't the
wasn't even in the
anointed one.
line of David.
Yeah,
Yeah, and he wasn't in the line of David. Like their own, even when the Christian church, when they developed the gospels, they even show you that Mary did not come from, the line of David. Mary came from a Levite, from the Levites or whatever.
Right.
And his real father was not Joseph. Joseph really was supposedly coming from the line of David, but Joseph wasn't God's father, wasn't Jesus' father. Joseph
Right.
was more like a stepfather. And then the
Right.
scriptures talk about how that doesn't count. You have to be a direct descendant of the line of David. You can't be, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
They
so
manipulated the
actually,
narrative.
it's yeah, so all of this stuff is the reason why Jews never really accepted Jesus. So the reason why the Pauline church went out is because he knew better than go bark up the wrong tree.
Yeah.
He's like, let's bark up the right tree and let's go talk to the Greeks and the Romans and let's throw in virgin births and let's throw in deification of Jesus and his kingdom is now in heaven. It's no longer a threat to Rome. It's in
Yeah.
heaven. His kingdom is no part of this world. So don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And that made it very palatable for the Roman and Gentiles to accept Christianity.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
and then that's my theory, and I think, and that's based on scholarship though. A lot of historians, Christian historians, think that narrative or that story probably makes more sense because it's more of a Gnostic telling. It's more of a kind of a Gnostic sort of version of Judaism,
Yeah.
and which makes it more easier to swallow if you're a Gentile because they were more like pagans, and pantheists. That's
Yeah.
why Paul quoted pantheist poets and shit when he spoke to them. Like you're
Yeah.
worshiping God. Your God is more than just this idol, this rock or whatever.
Yeah.
God is really the thing behind it. He's the thing beyond it.
Yeah.
And so he appealed to them in that pantheistic sort of way. And
Yeah.
that's why you were saying today, like on my show, you were saying how it seems like it was probably more of a Gnostic background from where Jesus came from, which makes sense. Like he used terms like the Father as
Yeah.
opposed to, Yahweh or the Lord or whatever.
Yeah.
He went directly to the Gnostic, ideal.
Yeah.
Um, and I believe that. I think that makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, that kind of refutes a lot of what these Christians want to claim.
And that's the problem, really. I mean, they want to deify Jesus. They want to exalt Jesus to a position that no one can reach, uh, not in this lifetime anyway, but that we should all follow as an example. But it's a belief that separates us from God. And and the thing is, to me, if Jesus really existed, he was just a normal person, just another human being like the rest of us, who may or may not have had mystical experiences. He may have explored his own mind, and then he came to a realization, which would be a realization akin to Carl Sagan's realization that we are the universe seen through human eyes. It would
Mm-hmm.
be like some kind of cosmic consciousness experience where he
Mm-hmm.
says, actually, we're all the same. So he would have been one of the first people or an early person to come up with the theory that um, we're the same subject, seeing through different eyes, seeing from different perspectives, and we're all the same. And he brings everyone together, because you start to lay a moral foundation because it's like we're all the same. We're going to treat each other the same. We can, you can found the golden rule, don't do unto others what you wouldn't have done unto you. And it's the beginning of something great, something beautiful, and it also emphasizes the fact that we're all kind of special. You know, we're all
Mm-hmm.
capable of thinking and being conscious and having experiences of suffering, of being happy, and we can change the world together when we can have the same goals. Um, we can come to an understanding. We can try and put ourselves in other people's shoes and see where they're coming from. It brings people
Yeah.
closer together. And you could even derive a kind of idealism, a kind of Christian idealism from that.
Yeah.
But I think the powers that be didn't allow it because they wanted to have control over people. So everyone had to be a sinner. Everyone had to be like a dirty worm, for example. In Islam, you also have that. You're dirty. You have to prove yourself to Allah, for example. You're unworthy and you have to do something in order to be saved because otherwise you're
Hmm.
lost. And if you believe in the wrong God, you're damned, even if you're
Yeah.
mistaken. And that's
Hmm.
terrible and it's illogical
Yeah. It's
and
illogical. Yeah.
immoral.
It's insane.
It's
And
insane. Yeah.
the,
It's a
and the
very,
guy was trying to tell me I was insane
yeah,
for
he's
appearing
insane.
to, yeah, he's
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, he was projecting everything he was accusing you of is him. Because
Yeah,
what's insane to me is saying that you don't require subjectivity for morality, and that God, the creator of the universe and responsible for morality, isn't a subject. So how does he know anything? I mean, is
right.
he unconscious? What good is he?
Right, right.
You know,
Because
that's
that's what
insane. That
consciousness
is
is.
insane.
That's insane.
Yeah,
It's not coherent in any kind of way,
yeah,
and it leads to so much evil atrocity because at that point anything goes. All you got to say is God told me it's okay. Like the so-called morality in the Bible. Like we went on with that other Christian guy a couple of weeks ago, who was like this slavery apologist, this guy who was trying to justify the stoning of women because they weren't apparently virgins on their marriage night,
right.
um, that
Oh my
said that
God.
owning women as property is the moral way to go, and all these very ugly, toxic ideas, and what leads to that is this kind of insanity. This kind of insanity makes anything possible. All you got to do is say, God said do it. If long it's like Abraham, it's like if God tells you to take your kid out and cut his head off with a knife, well, you better do it because God's the authority. He's the standard. You
Yeah,
might think it's wrong, but who are you to say it's wrong? You're what grounding do you have to say God's wrong to say murder your child?
yeah.
What grounding do you have?
So in other words, according to that worldview, you can't tell right from wrong, really. You
No.
can't build on any ethical foundation apart from God.
So how do
God
you know
has to
God's
tell
right?
you, yeah, God has to tell you that's good and
Right.
that's bad.
Right. But how do you know that?
Yeah,
If you're not the final authority, then how do you know who you choose your standard to be is the right one?
yeah,
And I think that that's part of the problem. That's part of the core issue here. Is it's um, an uncertainty in oneself. It's not being confident in one's own judgment. It's
yeah,
like I don't believe in myself. I have faith in everything else, but I don't have faith in myself
yeah,
because and yet they sort of tell you differently in their actions because you have enough confidence to trust this old book
yeah,
written by dead people. You're letting you're succumbing to peer pressure from people that died thousands of years ago.
yeah,
That's insane.
yeah,
How are you going to let people that died thousands of years ago tell you that you have no right to believe what you know in your heart is
yeah.
right and wrong?
And without even questioning how they arrived at that conclusion. And it's and it and these people that came up with that system, that philosophical system, which is a religion, and say that only God can tell you what's right and wrong. They're practically doing what parents sometimes do to their young children when they're tired and the child keeps saying, "Oh, why can't I do this? Why?" And they just turn around and say, "Don't ask questions because I told you to," you know.
Right.
And if you misbehave, you're not going to get this. You're not going to get any presents for Christmas, or you're going to get coal, or Santa's not going to come. And it's like it's almost like it treats people as children. you know,
Hmm.
and it doesn't explain to them. And on top of that says, don't question it. It's
Right.
unquestionable. You just follow
Right.
it based on faith without questions, or else.
And one of the things that they do, to their credit, one of the things they do, because you see in their worldview, there's a dichotomy. There's only two possible routes to take.
Yeah,
It's either the atheistic materialistic route or the theistic presuppositional route. There's only two
yeah,
as far as they're concerned. They don't believe in the third way. They don't believe that idealism and non-dualism is a real way to take.
yeah,
So for them, there's only two ways. And both of them commit the same problem because the materialist atheists also make the same argument. They accept that they do it in the inverse, like we were talking about earlier. They try to tell you, they try to deny experience too. And
yeah,
they try to tell you what's objectively right and wrong.
yeah,
But the problem with them is that they're probably more willing to go ahead and concede that morality is subjective, but then they treat it as if it's an objective fact on many, depending on what they want to cherry pick those topics are. Like say, like we're
that's right.
talking about the trans thing or any other thing. They're going to cherry pick that. It's just objectively a fact that you should put their experience above yours if you're a cis male or female or whatever. Um,
Yeah,
their experience trumps yours. So if you have fears about a man being in the ladies' room, too bad.
yeah,
Logan made a video on the Uncarved Block, and he did that. He did a little parody video, and so he was showing like his arguments against Christianity, saying, making the idealistic argument that no, because you don't know and you have your own opinion, you have the right to your own opinion. So what you're saying is not is an objective fact because you don't have evidence of it. And if you don't have evidence and there's no way for me to verify it objectively, then I don't have to believe it. And that justifies my atheism or agnosticism. And
yeah.
then he'll show another video where it'll be the trans issue, same thing. And his response is always, too bad. Like he'll show a video where a lady came in, a woman said, I didn't want this man in the bathroom with me because, he says he's trans, but I feel uncomfortable. And there's a video of a lady just saying that. And
Yeah.
then Matt Dillahunty responds, well, too bad. Too bad.
Wow. So
Yeah.
no
And he
no
goes,
regard, no
I don't
sensitivity
care.
for what that
Yeah. He goes, I
woman
don't
might have gone
care.
through.
Yeah.
What
He
if
says,
she
I
was
don't
raped
care.
by someone with a penis, let's say,
He
it,
said that. He even came up. That was the next video
right.
where the lady was saying that, well, the reason I'm having my fears is because of my experience. I got raped by someone who pretended to be trans, and I was alone in the bathroom, and he got away with it
So you can
and
understand the
stuff.
trauma.
Yeah, and he said, I'm trauma, and he said, so Matt, what do you got to say? He goes, too bad,
My
too bad.
God, no, that's
He said
that's
that he said
horrible.
the thing is, he goes, what you guys don't understand is that's just bigotry. You're just using little rare situations to promote your bigotry across the board when usually stuff like that doesn't even happen. And Logan was like,
Yeah.
but all you need is one example. That's all you need is
All we
one.
need is one example. Yeah.
That's all you need to
Yeah.
make my point. I'm not. What
Actually,
do I need to do?
yeah, actually, when political activists do that, which is exactly what Matt Dillahunty is, they dismiss the nature of the human mind because the human mind can undergo irrational fears, for example, right?
Hmm.
You only need to start from there. You can have phobias, which are irrational fears, and those phobias can be based on something that happened to you before, and you find it hard to shake off. You don't understand why you have that fear, but it always creates anxiety when you come across the same thing or something similar, right? So
Hmm.
it's not fair to call women who are fearful of anyone with a penis, it's not fair to call them bigots because that woman has been clearly traumatized, right? Because she was sexually
Right.
assaulted. So she doesn't trust anyone, regardless of
Right.
whether they are trans or
Or not.
cis or, because that's
And
that's
that's
the
what she was
language that
trying
they
to
use now.
say. That's what she
Yeah.
was saying. And Matt Dillahunty said, "No, I don't believe that garbage for a minute." He said, "That's how the bigots do. That's what they do in every situation. They try to say they hate blacks because they saw a black person do something, and you're trying to put it off. You can't do that, And he says that's not rational. It's not right. And it's like they don't understand. It's not that's you're doing the same thing the Christians do. Now you're doing the same thing they do.
Yeah.
Just on the inverse. You're trying to impose your beliefs onto other people. You don't
Imposing their
understand that other
beliefs
people.
and their definitions. And if you don't agree with their definition, then you're a
Mm-hmm.
bigot because you're
A bigot,
insensitive
right?
to other people. But at the same time, they're also being insensitive to people who have concerns about public spaces being shared with people with
Mm-hmm.
penises, and the thing is, and some people find it hard to let go of definitions of sex and gender, because
Mm-hmm.
for a long time people always equated sex with gender, right? But obviously there are intersex people and there are people who feel like they're in the wrong bodies, and
Mm-hmm.
nobody is denying that,
Mm-hmm.
but the problem is they need to understand that there will always be resistance to new language. And a lot of people will regard new language as newspeak, like the
Mm-hmm.
term used by George Orwell in 1984, and they fear that through newspeak, they can manipulate people and they can, and the moment you concede power to an institution or a government that goes along with a particular ideology, through intimidation or through accusations of bigotry,
Mm-hmm.
then it's the wrong approach, because then people will get really defensive and they will think, well, if I concede some power to that government or to that ideology and it spreads and the Overton window shifts, what's to stop them from going even further about other ideologies?
Anything. I mean, it leads to authoritarianism. I mean, this
Yeah,
whole idea that you're describing led to the election of Donald Trump.
yeah,
This idea that others speak, and being resistant to the intention of utilizing other speech as a way of controlling people's, because you control the language, you control the thoughts. We all know
yeah,
that. Like our speech is the reflection of what we think. So if you can control what people say, you can control how people think. And
yeah,
so Americans, they're not always stupid. They kind of put these things together. It's like you said, the new speak paradigm, like in from the 1984 book.
yeah,
Um, it applies. It's almost like a playbook. It's almost like the same thing that Nazi Germany did. And where that's all well and fine to point out when it's done through, your, not your preferred political party. You can easily see it. But
yeah,
when it's your preferred political party, you're more than willing to go along with it. So as long as you're a liberal, progressive person, as long as you're saying speech should be different so that we can control how people think, oh, that's fine. That's okay.
yeah,
But that leads to people like Donald Trump, because then there's other parts of the population
yeah,
that see through it and don't want it. And they're going to elect people like Donald Trump who just use their version of it
yeah,
to push their agenda. So everybody's in this stupid, echo chamber count,
yeah.
just
Donald
tribalism.
Trump
And it's
definitely exploited it, and I mean, it was bad enough that the country was already ideologically divided, and at times it felt like two cults, one on the left and one on the right. And it was so horrible and extreme, and there was no consensus on almost anything. There was no centrism even. And people just had to agree with the opinions of a whole group, and it's almost like identity politics in a way didn't focus on individual identity. People couldn't be
Right.
themselves. They had to go along with a group, and there wasn't much freedom. Even the right was guilty you know, uh, of not allowing people to differ from their opinions. Otherwise, they would say, "Oh, look at that lefty." They would
Mm-hmm.
call them names. They would say, they would say things like libtard. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they would call them libtards, and then
Libtard,
on the left,
snowflake.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then on the left they would say to the people on the right, "Oh, look at them, they're fascists, they're
Wingnut. Yeah.
bigots." Yeah, and it's like, come on, people, stop with the name calling and actually have sensible conversations and try and come up with an agreement. Some kind of way of living that it's agreeable with everyone as much as it can be, and where everyone feels respected and heard, and where we don't, um, because even the issue with transgenderism, I feel that there are a lot of voices which are bigoted and they don't
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge their existence. I mean, it's a
Right.
fact. It's an undeniable fact. Nature
Yep.
is funny. Nature is the way it is, and it doesn't care. It's a fact that people feel like they're in the wrong bodies, and it's no
Mm-hmm.
use calling them crazy because
Right.
it's just not fair. And besides, the people who are calling them crazy, they're not even um, psychologists or psychiatrists.
No, they're
They
just they're
have no
just
medical background whatsoever, and
they're
they're
just
making these
assholes.
assessments. And it's
They're
it's
just
it's
being assholes.
ridiculous.
You
You
know,
know,
and the thing, like you said, you made a good point. Like nature operates through us, and when it operates through us, it doesn't give a shit like
yeah,
what our situation is. Like, like I'm a musician, like I like to make music, beats and write stuff and
yeah,
do podcast creative stuff. And somebody like maybe my family or somebody would say, but you don't really make a lot of money doing that. And so why do you do it? And it's like, I don't do it because I really sat back and thought about it like, oh, I'm really good at this shit. So I'm going to do it to make a lot of money. Like nature doesn't give a fuck if you're good at it or not.
yeah.
It just wants you to do it. For whatever reason, you have to get up and do this stuff because
That's right.
it's kind of like an urge, like a sexual urge,
Yeah,
like
it's
you're
almost
going to
like
have
a
sex with your
calling.
wife.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like a calling. It's like, oh, it's time to do this or that. It's time to eat. It's time to drink. It's time to
yeah,
create a podcast. It's time to,
yeah.
you feel it. You feel the inspiration come on. You feel
Yeah.
the craving to actually
It's like, yeah,
get
I want to talk
embodied
about this
into that.
stuff. I want to shshare my ideas. I
Yeah, I
want to
want
put
to
this
get
stuff
in.
out
Yeah, let's
there.
have
I want to see
fun.
what people think.
And
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
feel. Yeah, it's all based on a feeling, and that feeling comes from nature. It doesn't come from intellectual knowledge. It comes from an experience.
yeah.
And nature has a way of just driving through. Like I can't just not do it. Like I can't just say, yeah, you're right, guys. I'm not making a lot of money doing podcasts or whatever. So I'm just gonna stop. No, I've got to do it. It's like you just have to do it
Yeah.
because nature wants to do that through you for whatever reason. It doesn't care whether it's putting money in your pocket. It doesn't care whether
No.
there's some practical benefit. Whatever the reason is that the greater mind wants to express itself that way through you, it's
Yeah.
going to do it regardless. And
Yeah.
it doesn't even have to be a necessarily positive thing. There's psychopaths that do a lot of negative shit
Yeah.
because nature just pushes its agenda through. I want you to go and do some awful things in public to people, or
Yeah.
something. And you do it because you're sort of compelled to do it. That's just nature acting through you for
Yeah.
whatever reason. And we all talk about the problem of evil and stuff. And
Yeah.
and like, yeah, I can see like if you're a God believer and your idea of the God is all good. He doesn't have any bad qualities. He's all powerful. So he doesn't have to do anything he doesn't want to do. And he knows everything. So whatever he does, he knows it's gonna what the outcome's gonna be at the end before he even does it. If
Yeah.
that's your idea of God, then you're going to have a really big hard time explaining psychopaths and murderers and,
Definitely.
you know, um, hurricanes and tornadoes and other things that nature does, that it just does. It just
Yeah.
imposes itself
This
onto.
is why I find something like Brahman, those
Mhm.
concepts of a god or a deity, or the absolute, the pleroma, consciousness, the ground of being, bliss, all of that. I find those concepts of God, of an
Mhm.
absolute, more plausible, more believable
Yes, of
than a
course.
personal God that's jealous
Of
and
course.
you know
Like, for me, that's just a no-brainer. Like,
yeah,
for me, that's why I it's so easy to kind of talk to a lot of these Christians, because for me it's just so obvious, and if you can just ask the right question, you can probably make it painfully clear that what they're talking about really makes no sense,
yeah,
without even getting into the Bible. Like, I can enjoy getting into, and sometimes that's the route to take, because sometimes Christians, they don't understand logic and philosophy so well. They just
yeah,
understand how they feel, again,
yeah.
nature imposing itself on things.
They're
So maybe the
Philistines.
best, yeah, the Philistines. So it's kind of good to sort of show the problems within their own framework. Like, let's go inside your view. Oh, your view is based on the Bible. Okay, well, let's show how the Bible is not supporting what you think,
Yeah,
or let's show how the Bible is contradicting it. You just ask questions like, is the Bible infallible? Is it 100% right? Yes, it's 100% correct on everything it says. Okay, are contradictions in the Bible? No, there's no contradictions. Is a contradiction when you say one thing and then another place it says something opposite? Yes, that's a contradiction. Okay, can I show you in the Bible where that happens? It doesn't happen. I show them. Well, it just depends on how you interpret it,
interpret.
and
Yeah,
then it becomes a pretzel, conversation.
yeah,
And that's kind of where it's either going to go there, and they'll just dig their heels in and go pretzel, or they'll actually see what you're talking about and say, "Huh, I have to think about that. I have to research that and get back to you." That's a more honest, response to,
yeah,
to finding seeming contradictions in the Bible. Or I
yeah,
wouldn't even call them contradictions. Let's just call them tensions.
yeah.
That's enough. There's a tension. That's enough.
There's a tension, and that's enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just go and admit there's a tension.
And they're
If you
very
can't admit there's a
dogmatic. They will
yeah.
say anything and do anything just to, it's a kind of cognitive dissonance. They will do everything they can just to preserve their belief. That's the dogma. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise, because then it's a thing of the devil. It's the devil
Hmm.
trying to sway you away from it. Um, so any other religious concepts from other denominations, other faiths, they tend to attack them and to dismiss them. Like what Chris was doing with Hinduism, for example. He was trying to say that there was a contradiction with Hinduism. It self-refuted, um, and it was something to do with, I can't remember. Was it something to do with consciousness? Yeah, again, it was going back to the concept of consciousness, the knowing, and also knowledge that you can have, that distinction. I think it was something along those lines, which he was saying, oh, well, if the concept of Maya, that's it. He was saying the concept of Maya, which is to do with the world of illusions, the world is an illusion, refutes itself. But he was failing to make the distinction between the contents of consciousness, which can have multiple interpretations with consciousness itself. So he just said, oh, the whole thing, if you say the whole thing is an illusion, then it's self-refuting. And I think it was a straw man of the entire Hindu religion or even Buddhism. And they would dismiss concepts like what we talked about before, like Abraxas. Um, in
Hmm.
fact, Abraxas is also seen as not just an Egyptian god, but also an Egyptian demon. So it's both. And right there, you have the beginning of a solution to the problem of evil. Why is there evil, but also good things? It's a mixed bag, like you said before. And in the concept of Abraxas is that um, that Elohim. It has a love to know everything, to express everything. So it doesn't matter how human minds
Right.
interpret their
Judge
own
it.
experiences. It's
Hmm.
all one thing. So from that perspective, everything's okay, and he
It
loves
has to,
expressing a
yeah.
multitude. So it's
It has to go to every nook and cranny. Otherwise, it's not going to really know.
otherwise
It
it's not
has to go
omniscient.
through every. Yeah,
Bingo.
it's got to, and yeah,
Yeah,
it's got to um, explore every facet of
yeah,
every possible scenario
exactly.
in its mind,
And
you
it's
know,
non-judgmental. Whereas
and it's
from the
non-judgmental.
yeah, from
But
the perspective of a human, it's it's kind of like both malevolent and benevolent. It's a mixed bag. So humans will make a judgment of that concept, of that pleroma. Nature can be
mhm.
cruel, nature can be good, nature can be interesting. But from that perspective of that mind at large, it's just doing its own thing because it can, and it's beautiful, and it's great, and it's infinite, and it has to know and experience absolutely everything, and it's omniscient, and it allows everything to be, and it's a
Yeah.
kind of unconditional love. That's how humans would best describe it.
But
It's an unconditional love.
and this is why I enjoy just as a psychological exploration, like a little research on the mind of the believers, the true believers, is how quick they're willing to drop their most heartfelt, genuine beliefs for their presuppositions that the Bible is the final authority, right? And it's
Yeah.
just interesting to see how that plays out. And I always like to set it up. Like I had a conversation not long ago with a Christian, and the way I set it up, I said, "So let me ask you about morality, right and wrong." He's like, "Sure." So I was like, "So let me give you an example, and maybe the Bible guides you in this understanding, right? Would it be just, let's say you did something very terrible, maybe like um, you took my wife and had sex with my wife behind my back. So my punishment to you is going to be to go and grape your wife. Would that be just?" And he says, "Of course not. God, that's ungodly. It's not even logical, because if I'm the one who committed the atrocity, I'm the one that should pay the penalty of the price, and you should take me to a formal court. If we were in Bible times, you go before the elders, and then I would be punished for adultery accordingly. So I don't understand my answer is very clear and easily known." I'm like, "You sure about that?" He's like, "Of course I'm sure about that. No, there's no conceivable way that I would think differently on. There's nothing you can tell me to change my mind, Scott," is what he told me. So I said, "Even if I showed you in the Bible different," he says, "you're not going to show me from the Bible that that's any different, because I know my Bible. I'm a Christian. You're not, remember?"
Yeah.
So I said, okay, fine, fine. All right, well, can I at least get a shot at it? He's like, "Sure, but you're going to fail. And I promise you." And I'm like, "Well, if I show you and you do change your mind on this, which I know you think now you could never." He says, "Dude, I'm never, we can bet $1,000 or whatever. I'll never change my mind on that."
Infallible belief, eh?
I'm like, I don't even want you to give me $1,000. I just want you to apologize to me when I point it out to you." And he goes, "Oh, sure, I'll apologize, but it ain't ever going to happen, because you're wrong, Scott. I know my Bible. I know my God. You're just coming from your stupid non-dual idealism point, you know." And I'm like, "Okay, so let's go," because he forgets I used to be a Christian. So I said, let's go to 2 Samuel 12, 11 through 12, and then Samuel 16, 21 through 22. So we open our Bibles, we look at it together. And so what happened is in this 2 Samuel 12 prophecy, remember the story of David and Bathsheba? And David had killed Bathsheba's husband so that he could have sex with the beautiful Bathsheba, who was a Hittite, not even an Israelite, right? So that's what happened. But then later in 2 Samuel 12, the prophet Nathan delivered God's word to David. And this is what God had to say to David. So saith the Lord. This is the Lord speaking. This is Yahweh speaking.
Yeah.
So saith like Yahweh, out of your own household, I am going to bring calamity on you. Before your very eyes, I will take your wives and I will give them to the one who is close to you, your neighbor, and he will sleep with your wives in broad daylight in front of everyone. Now, the penalty for sleeping with somebody else is death unless you're being raped. If you're raped, you don't get punished. But if the women committed adultery, then they're to be stoned to death.
Wow.
Keep that in mind. So then it goes on, and Yahweh says, for I, the Lord, say, you did this in secret, but I, the Lord, will do this thing in broad daylight before all of Israel. So what happened?
It's beyond eye for an eye, isn't it? It's not
right,
even give them the other cheek. It's,
yeah. So what happened?
You take an eye, I'll take both eyes and everything else from you.
And everything else. So if you go to the second part, 2 Samuel 16, it gets fulfilled. There becomes this coup against David's kingdom, right?
Yeah.
And this is when he falls. This is the coup against the kingdom. And so the passage goes on in 2 Samuel 16. It says that to demonstrate his power and make reconciliation with the Father impossible, Absalom's counselor, who is Ahithophel, gave him this advice. He told him to do this. He goes, go grape your father's concubines, his wives, whom he left to take care of his palace while he's gone. Do it on the roof. That way all of Israel will see you have made yourself obnoxious to your father. In the hands of everyone with you will be more resolute to see this humiliation. So basically, during this coup, while David's not there serving as king, go into his palace and grape his wives, and do it, grab them, take them on the top of the roof, and do it in front of all the spectators.
Wow.
As a humiliation. And so they pitched the tent for Absalom on the roof, and he slept with all of David's concubines and wives in the sight of all of Israel, says 2 Samuel 16:22. Now, these concubines were not stoned to death because it was understood that this was against their will. So this was a graping. And so what did my interlocutor say about that?
What did he say?
He says, well, yeah, but how do you know that the women didn't choose that? It was probably them that wanted to do it.
Oh, but then
I'm like, okay, show me in the scripture where it says that, number one. And also, why weren't they stoned to death if that was the case?
Yeah.
And he says, well, maybe they didn't know. I'm like, they didn't know. It was in the Bible. It was written right there in front of all of Israel.
It's almost like they're already trying apologetics without realizing it, or maybe they're just going there. They're doing everything they can to preserve their belief and trying to justify the passages somehow.
He never apologized. He never even, I said, but even if you disagree with it and you interpret this in a way that you're turning yourself into a pretzel in order to make it make sense somehow, and even if you can you at least understand how someone like me would view that? And he goes, no, it's clear. It's clear that this wasn't
all of a sudden the rape endorsed by God isn't rape because the victim wanted it, and And it's, oh
And it
God.
wasn't even God. God didn't do this to him.
Yeah,
That wasn't God doing this to David. It was Absalom.
yeah,
Like, yeah, but God, it says whenever you see a scripture that says, "So saith the Lord," who's
yeah, yeah,
speaking?
yeah.
Who's the one speaking? He says, "The Lord."
It's the
Right.
Lord. Yeah,
And the Lord says, "Who's going to do this? You did this in secret, but I am going to do this in broad daylight." Who is the I? Who is
yeah,
the I here? And he
yeah.
goes, "Oh, that's Absalom." No, that's not Absalom. That's remember at the beginning it says, "I, the Lord, saith these things." And they did everything he could to try to avoid
Yeah,
pinpointing this on Yahweh. It was
yeah,
just so telling. So when I do this psychological, research, I'm trying to think, what is it that's making them like, are they even interested in the truth? Are they interested in the evidence? Like,
yeah,
what's the game here? What are they trying to preserve?
yeah,
They've got to think to themselves,
yeah,
this at least calls into question my God's intention and whether this thing makes sense or not.
yeah. There
It's
must be
got
some
it's
kind of
got to.
cognitive, there must be some kind of cognitive dissonance going on because you know, you are revealing to them that the Bible is a centuries old book that's been most likely corrupted, it's been
Yeah.
changed, added to, and they can't take it because then it undermines the reliability of the Bible. It's like you can no longer take it seriously, especially if you take a literalist interpretation and you want to believe in the miracles, you want to believe in the just God, and at the
Mm-hmm.
same time you don't know your Bible well, and your pastor probably tells you don't read those passages by yourself, don't read the Bible by yourself. Let me tell you what the passages say and what they really mean, which is how a lot of people take Christianity, really. They call
Mm-hmm.
themselves Christians, but they're not experts in scripture and in
They
history.
don't know their book.
They
They
don't
don't
know
even
their
read their
books,
book.
no.
No. It's just like it just shows you the power maybe of peer pressure or
Yeah,
the power of feelings, like wanting to feel, I don't know, maybe this God for some reason signifies, like, because I can imagine when I was a Christian and I thought of God and Jesus, I thought of this all wise, all loving father figure that wanted to hold you in his bosom and love you, and he's just pitching in for you. I just hope he's gonna choose the right way. We want him to do the right thing. Like, they're always in your corner, and they send you angels and
yeah,
spirits to help you. The Holy Spirit's there to help you, and they, so I had this loving view of God.
yeah,
But when I started reading the book, like all of these passages, like the one I gave you and the other ones, it's like this isn't consistent with that. And so, you can do one or two things. You can like say, oh, well, those parts aren't really written by God. Those were added in later by some asshole
yeah,
that didn't really, this isn't
yeah.
really God's thoughts. That was the added part. But just believe the good stuff. Like, it's like cherry picking.
Cherry
And it's like,
picking.
or
Yeah,
or or you can say, well, somehow we can turn this into a deeper story. Like, it's not really about David. David symbolizes the part of humanity that is, needs to course correct. And
yeah,
sometimes through karma, we bring these things on ourselves. So Absalom was sort of a analogy of how karma unfolds for you if you're not conscious of the decisions we make in life. While you did this thing in broad daylight or in secret, I'm going to do it in broad daylight. So that's kind of like karma. It's like you've
yeah,
done this thing in secret, but karma is going to get you out, get you back in front of everybody you
yeah,
know so they try to turn it into these weird things. But if you're really consistent with that, then you're going to still have a problem, especially if you're going to try to hold on to this presuppositional, fundamentalist view of God. I don't see how those things are going to really
no.
work.
And it goes against the efforts to not have any preconceptions so that you can try and make a judgment for yourself. as unbiased as you could be, and not many people are doing that these days. And I'll tell you something. I just a couple of days ago, actually, I had a synchronicity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Me and my wife were on the way home from I think the hospital. My wife had a medical appointment, and we'd also been to the vet because we have a new puppy, uh, a prince, no, a King Charles Spaniel. She's very sweet. But
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
we were going home, and on the way home, just before we got on the bus, we decided to go in a shop to get a drink and a chocolate. And the guy there was a Jain. I don't know if you're familiar with
Mm-hmm.
Jainism, but they don't. They have
Pacifist, yeah.
compassion for all life forms. They say that we shouldn't kill anything. They're opposed
Mm-hmm.
to killing any life form whatsoever, even microscopic life forms,
Mm-hmm.
flies, microbes, everything. Like we should avoid killing anything, right? And the thing is, the Jain community has actually helped around here. They've actually helped a lot of animals that have been abandoned. Right? They've done a great work for the animals. They've helped animals a lot. They've done a lot for the animals, and they should be praised for it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But then this guy, the shop owner, he gives me a leaflet um, instructing me to buy products to avoid killing, microbes, stuff like that, right? And
Right.
avoid flies. And it actually said avoid killing anything because even when you kill a fly, uh, it incurs bad karma, right? So I was thinking to myself, that's an extreme belief. And I said to my wife, I even joked with her, look, this guy can't be a farmer because, farmers have to kill pests to protect the crops.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
it's not practical. This is ridiculous, right? But it's good
Mm-hmm.
that they're doing something for the animals, they're
Right,
saving
right,
the
right.
animals, they're feeding them, they're providing shelters and stuff like that. So we went home and I took the leaflet with me to show to my son so we could have a laugh about it. And
Mm-hmm.
he looked at it. He said, "Yeah, this is ridiculous." And on top of that, it's asking you to buy more products. It's almost like it's
Yeah, yeah, it's
it's
a
it's
sales
selling it,
point.
And as we were talking about this, my wife puts the telly on, and she decides to watch an episode of The Block, which is to do with house makeovers and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And um, and suddenly, one of the contestants reprimands another one who is trying to kill a fly. This woman, she all of a sudden says, "Oh, don't kill flies because that's bad karma. They're also living creatures." And I was like,
Mm.
"What the hell?"
What?
This is really weird. And I
What
even
a
said to my wife,
coincidence. Yeah.
"I'm going to put this leaflet in the bin because it feels like I've just brought some kind of synchronistic
Yeah, into the house.
vibes
Yeah.
here." Some weird synchronistic vibes. So I put the paper in the bin, and I was thinking to myself, I still think that the belief is extreme, even though it's well intended. Um, but when I experience the synchronicity, because to me reality is like layers of meaning and experiences, and when I saw that on the telly and it was a clear synchronicity, the personal meaning it had to me wasn't, oh, you must become a Jain and you have to agree with the precepts of their religion. It wasn't that.
Mm-hmm.
The personal meaning I got was that the synchronicity gave me some perspective on how to treat my baby puppy, because I found myself at times losing my patience with the puppy because the puppy's teething and she explores everything with her mouth. She runs around.
Mm-hmm.
She's only a puppy, right? And my
Mm-hmm.
wife tells me you have to be understanding of the puppy. She can't help it. She needs training. And it's like, yeah, okay, I have to remind myself, but she pisses me off sometimes. Um, with that synchronicity, the personal meaning I got was, oh, Well, it's impractical for me to try and avoid killing absolutely everything. I can't help it. At some
Hmm.
point I'm going to kill millions of microbes without realizing. And I've already killed plenty of flies in the kitchen. I already, if there is such a thing as bad karma, I've already incurred enough bad karma in my life. So
Enough,
I
yeah.
dismiss all of that, right? But I'm thinking to myself, that's given me perspective. That's the meaning I derived from that synchronicity, from that
Hmm.
meaningful coincidence. It
Yes.
puts into perspective, well, I can at least try to be more compassionate towards my pet. I can try and
Mm.
understand where the pet is coming from. And straight
Right,
away, that's the
right.
personal meaning I derived from it. And it makes me think in
Mm.
my idealistic worldview, that's what it meant to me, and that's how it helps me to be me as much as I can, as much as I want to be well intentioned and a good
And
person.
what can Christianity
Yeah,
represent? Like, even if you can look at all, we can talk about all the inconsistencies and problems and contradictions, but overall, Christianity can represent a very positive message for humanity, like kind of like what you were saying. Like, yeah, you can
yeah,
easily see the problems inherent with the concepts,
yeah,
but the big picture is, look, the whole point is be compassionate.
yeah,
You don't have to buy into a lot of the ridiculous, over exaggerating, the behavior, or kind of like look at how it can be a problem, logically, but it can still represent something valuable that you
yeah,
can use in your life. And so Christianity sort of embodies and illustrates some of the higher virtues of humanity, like
yeah,
self-sacrifice, giving to the poor, having empathy,
yeah,
and fighting against legalism, because legalism misses the spirit. It misses the whole
yeah,
point of the laws that we have. Um, so there's a lot of benefit to what Jesus taught, even if Jesus didn't even exist as a real singular person. Maybe it was just an emerging representation based on what a lot of different prophets of the time were talking
yeah.
about.
Well,
I
that's what
know,
Jesus Christ means to me. Yeah, it's that archetype that we should pay
yeah,
attention to. It's a
right,
psychological thing that we should aspire to. It doesn't have to be a person that really existed about 2000 years ago. Just the idea of Jesus Christ, how we can't help but idolize him in a way, because we everyone has had a good, or most people, at least in the West, have had a good um, conception of Jesus Christ as this admirable person, all loving, all good, and kind, and understanding and helpful. We can
hmm,
look at that as kind of like an archetype that we can follow, and if you want to call that worship, you can call it worship, but we don't have to use that religious language, but it's
right,
something that's valuable. We can follow that example as something valuable, um, as something that good and exemplary that we can conceptualize in our minds. I mean, what do you think? It doesn't have to be something
right.
physically real.
Of course, of course. It's that's the beauty of having the ability to interpret things and find meaning,
Yeah,
is that we can take anything and turn it into a very meaningful and virtuous thing for us in our life. And it's only just, I think that people who like to point out the flaws, and because any given system, any sort of, even humanitarianism, there's a lot of inconsistencies there too.
yeah,
Because if the whole thing is well-being, well, you have to define what is well, to push church doctrine, like, because on the other hand, humanitarianism says we should only strive to promote rationality, science, and logic,
yeah,
and religion should be a thing that we leave behind
yeah.
as a no longer useful tool in our toolbox, is what it says in its
Yeah, might be premature, right?
manifesto. Right. But then someone's well-being could entail
Yeah.
religion in some way. So isn't that a contradiction? But no, but and what they'll always argue with, yeah, I see your point. Maybe logically, if we really get down to it, you've got a point. There is a very obvious contradiction there. But what we're really trying to say is that overall, okay, we should be trying to be, it's like, okay, I understand. Well, why don't you give Christianity the same sort of pass? Why don't you give
Yeah.
religion the same sort of free pass? Like, while you can easily point out some of the evils in Christianity or contradictions, why don't you try to look at the overall positive interpretation? You
Yeah.
can do that with anything. You're doing it now with your humanitarianism.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, I think there's a good point to be made with that. That we should really, or we could justify looking at the positives and being a little bit of a cherry picker,
Yeah.
and kind of looking at the Jordan Peterson view of
Yeah.
Christianity, maybe.
Yeah. Well, isn't it funny that, especially in the world of Jordan Peterson and the world of postmodernism and how people argue for their concepts and their ideologies, isn't it funny, right, that all these concepts, they're just, it's almost like people are having their own dreams and abiding by those dreams like it's absolutely real.
Mm.
And these concepts, they clash with one another. But in the end, they're only illusions, really, I think, especially after the
Yeah,
experience I've just told you about, where I could almost like flip a switch. It felt like flipping a
yeah,
switch in my brain in that
yeah,
state of, that hypnagogic state where I could decide on whether I should understand, uh, like the image of a wardrobe. I could flip a switch from understanding what the object is, which
yeah.
is a wardrobe, and then going to a state of mind where I
Of
don't
not
know what that is, and it's just a form, just a shape, and I could go
that.
back and
Yeah,
forth choosing, and
that's an
really it just
aspect of
goes to
lucid
show.
dreaming. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's an
yeah,
aspect of lucid dreaming. Like, you're dreaming, yet you can fall it. You can go with it or not. You
yeah,
can
and
go
that's
any.
that's the
And
thing, right?
that's a great analogy, because
Yeah,
actually that's exactly what's going on, and we all do it. Like, we all fall in. It's kind of like how when you wake up, you realize, why was I so scared in my dream? Because the dream didn't even make any sense. Like, there was nothing
yeah.
really to be scared of. Like,
It only seemed like it made sense.
the thing that was chasing me was, like, I had a dream one time of Daffy Duck chasing me around with a
Yeah,
rubber, stick. Number one, rubber sticks don't hurt you. Number one, Daffy Duck doesn't exist.
yeah,
It's a cartoon.
yeah,
By definition, it doesn't exist.
yeah,
So in my dream, I was scared to death.
yeah,
Why was I scared to death? It was only until I woke up that I realized how absurd the whole dream was.
yeah.
And it's kind of like the same thing going on here. When people adhere to these worldviews, they simply turn a blind eye to the obvious contradictions and intentions
They do, yeah,
within the view. And
yeah,
until they wake up, like, it wasn't until I woke up from being a Christian
yeah.
that I saw
That
these
you saw
absurdities.
how absurd
Right,
it
just
all
like a
was, yeah.
dream, just like I was stuck in a
Just like a
dream.
dream,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's a
And
great, and
and
I'll
the thing
use
is,
that.
we're constantly dreaming. There's a great quote by Stephen LaBerge. I don't know if you know him. He's the great
Mm-mm.
lucid dreaming expert. People reckon
Mm,
in America he was hailed as the one who proved lucid dreaming in the lab, but it was actually Keith Hearn here in England, and then it
mhm.
was Stephen LaBerge who conducted similar experiments, and then he popularized it, right? But
Yeah.
Stephen LaBerge said something quite profound. He said, um, "Perception is dreaming constrained by sensory input."
Hmm.
Dreaming is perception unconstrained by sensory input. And right there, it's like you realize that in dreams, you are perceiving, it's a perception, but you're absolutely free to just take in the absurd as if it makes sense, as if it's obvious.
Hmm.
Anything goes, hey, and
No
you can
constraints.
derive. a great plot from it that satisfies you. And it's not until you wake up to this world and then you have to you remember the rules of logic and the
Hmm.
the laws
The
of physics
constraints.
of this
Yeah.
reality, which is kind of like a more restrained world, which is shared by other minds. It's almost like
Yeah.
kind of like a dreaming as well. But you're dreaming, but it's constrained by sensory input because you're perceiving
Yes.
it through who you perceive yourself to be with the physical body and everything else. And then you think, right, from this perspective, I can see that the dream was illogical. It just didn't make sense. It was
Uh-huh.
absurd, and it just puts things into perspective, doesn't it? And with people and ideologies, it is exactly the same thing.
Well,
And you can
see,
get in
my
states. The
sister.
state, just to make it clear, the state I described to
Hmm.
you in hypnagogia, I was actually lucid. I knew exactly what was going on. I was in bed and I was seeing something, but I could flip between understanding what the object was in front of me and not really knowing. So I could choose. This is the thing. It's like I had the freedom to choose, which based on that discovery of what my mind can do, what consciousness itself can do. It can go from knowing and not knowing, and it can choose. It can choose any perspective it desires in that state. Imagine the possibility of other states where there's more freedom, for example. And it makes me think in the idealistic worldview, if you think of a mind at large, if you think of an absolute, let's say, or some kind of concept of God like Abraxas, which goes beyond the demiurgic God of Christianity, the jealous one. Let's say existence, if we're going to take it to be some kind of deity, which is consciousness itself, which includes all minds, that totality, that pleroma. Let's say, right, that has the ability, the capacity to develop any kind of perspective, any kind of mind whatsoever, any mind that can know some things and not know everything else, and it can differ from other minds, and it
Uh-huh.
can have those experiences of being finite and also within those finite perspectives, it can also enter into altered states where we can also choose between what to experience and what to perceive, and also including the intellect and logic. We can have different
Yeah.
types of logic. It
They
could be
call
so
it,
convoluted. It's
yeah, it's
you
called
know
false awakening. Um, and my
like a false
sister,
awakening. Yeah,
yeah, and my sister, she developed a condition from her NDEs. She had three of them in her life. And so much of it, what it did is it kind of screwed her perception up totally. Like she says now, like she says, oftentimes I wonder, like I'm just walking through a dream. Like whenever I'm really living life, it feels like a dream.
yeah,
Like my memories seem like dream-like memories. Like even if I remembered what we did yesterday doing this, the impression is it was just a dream. And
yeah,
so her waking life has turned into a kind of lucid dream. And she said that happened because there was some kind of shift she went through. And it's kind of like an altered perception of reality. It's feeling like they're in a lucid dream, but being fully awake. And she kind of describes the waking world as feeling like a dream with a heightened sense of awareness, but a feeling of disconnection or feeling like an observation or an observer of surrounding people and events and things like that. And it seemed like, but when I went through the NDE is when I really woke up to the real reality. Like that's when
yeah,
it became very clear that, oh, I get it. So it's kind of like I used to go to sleep, have dreams, and wake up and be like, oh, I had a silly dream. I don't know why I was so scared or concerned in the dream,
yeah.
but now I'm awake, so it was just, so whatever.
So
But
according to your
now it's the
sister,
other way around. Yeah.
yeah. So according to your sister, and like many other people who have these experiences, once you enter into the realm of the NDE, you experience a kind of hyper reality that what that the this world by comparison is, it feels like a vague dream almost, and when you come back, it's it's lacking, isn't it? So it's almost
Hmm.
like she stepped outside of Plato's cave, the allegorical cave,
Yeah.
and then she
And now she's
returned.
stuck in this dream.
Yeah,
And yet the dream is there's still consequences. So it's like she realizes, no, I'm supposed to, whoever designed this thing or whatever this thing is supposed to be, I'm supposed to take this part serious though. But
yeah,
because I had these NDEs, it kind of fucked my orientation up. So now I'm not sure what's the dream and what's not now. And so now I'm kind of like in this altered state of consciousness continually. And I have, and of course, when you live in the moment, you're trying to live in the moment, it becomes clear maybe for a while. But then as you remember on it, you're thinking, oh, that was just kind of like a fuzzy dream, or it didn't really make sense either. So it's
yeah,
kind of like, it just leaves this impression like my life is sort of empty. It's sort of like a dreamy, unreal, sort of valueless sort of existence, which she says, you would think, like, if you'd have asked me years before my NDE, when I was just curious about spirituality and crystals and stuff like that, I would think, oh, I can't wait that, oh, those people are so blessed to have an NDE. Oh, they get the better perspective of life. They come out thinking, oh, they've probably turned into gurus or something. She says, but in my experience, I turned into a mess. Like it's just
yeah,
turned into nothing's really making a whole lot of sense. And so it's not even something I can really talk about anymore like I used to.
yeah.
Like I can only talk, she talks to me because I understand. But to anyone else, it's not really going to make sense. And it's even going to make the experience worse because now if you can't even see your waking life as a reality, then how the hell are we supposed to buy into this near death experience thingy? You
Yeah,
know?
it's funny you mentioned your sister's experience because with NDEs, because it reminds me of an NDE I read. I think it was in Bruce Grayson's After, or Jeffrey Long's long study. It's probably the longest NDE study ever conducted by Jeffrey Long, where they even counted how many times certain words were used by NDEers, like bliss and love and stuff like that. But there was a particular case of a woman who had an NDE, and she used really poetic language to describe it. She said um, it was kind of like a wider reality that she was exposed to, and everything was far more real and more uh, and richer in color. And she said something funny. She said, "It's almost like I've been living in a dark warehouse with a little torch all my life, with sharing it with other people with torches that don't work so well,
Mm-hmm.
with their lights really feeble, and we can't see much of reality. So it's like this dark warehouse. But then all of a sudden, when I had my near-death experience, it's almost like someone turned the lights on and I could see the warehouse really clearly and how vast it was. And, she said it expanded my awareness. And now I find it hard to really describe what that was like, going back to the dark warehouse and telling other people, then straight away you think that's Plato's cave. That's
Mm-hmm.
exactly
It's
Plato's
the
cave.
Apostle Paul who
Yeah,
says that the scales on a, we see through a veil dimly, and the scales were lifted once he had that experience. The scales were lifted from his eyes, and he was able to see the reality more
yeah,
clearly. So his experience, at least what was recorded in his letters, seemed almost like a near-death experience, which even makes me wonder: did he have an epileptic seizure?
yeah,
Because these are other ways of people having sort of these sort of experiences of seeing lights and hearing voices and falling to the ground and all of these things. So it's sort of he had a religious experience
yeah,
and probably maybe he did or didn't persecute the Christians. Maybe that was just a selling point into being a church leader at that time. But even if he was, you could say that maybe his guilt on top of that religious experience would sort of indicate and have a meaning, the greater mind telling you,
Yeah.
don't do that,
Yeah.
for whatever reason, it wanted to say, don't do that. This is the meaning that was imposed on him. Like, oh,
Yeah.
so this is God, and this is so when I'm persecuting these Christians, I'm actually persecuting the greater
Yeah.
mind. I'm it's almost like a non-dual sort of
Yeah.
perspective. It's like when I do wrong to my fellow man, I'm actually doing wrong to
It's like you're
nature.
part of it and it's a part of
Mm-hmm.
you, and it speaks to you. It's like nature's speaking to you through this layer of meaning, and it can be personal to you. And
Uh-huh.
and sometimes it's like even people who had a calling in their lifetimes and they knew exactly what to do and they felt inspired. Sometimes they can arrive at a point where even that can seem really devoid of meaning by when they have these altered states of consciousness. By comparison to those states, it's
Uh-huh.
almost like they're even closer to the source, and all of a sudden their life's work ceases to have meaning. Like what happened to Thomas Aquinas. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading. It's actually called Alchemy by Carl Jung's friend and fellow psychoanalyst. Is an interesting book actually. It's psychology mixed with mythology and stuff like that. And it mentions Thomas Aquinas. So it talks about the concept of a dark night of the soul, and then it talks of a rising dawn, when you come out of that darkness and you start to see the light, and you come out feeling better, you're enlightened. And and he talks of Thomas Aquinas because apparently he just before he died, he was very ill, and he fell into a weird stupor where he was unresponsive, and it went on for a few weeks, and people couldn't snap him out of it. And but then one day he woke up from that stupor, and he seemed really down. So that people asked him, what's wrong?" And he said, "I've been to a place where uh, my life's work feels like straw." He said something along those lines, as if to say, all my work is meaningless. It just feels like straw compared to where I've been. And Carl Jung interpreted it as Thomas Aquinas being overwhelmed by the unconscious, the collective unconscious, which to me and Bernardo Kastrup would be
Mm-hmm.
the mind at large. So he was
Yeah.
flooded with it in some altered
Mm-hmm.
state where all of a sudden all his life's work was like straw, like dry, you know.
Yeah.
That's my alarm going off.
Uh,
Yeah. That's the wife said you have 2 hours and then you have to come off so that we can watch EastEnders together,
oh, okay. What
which
is
is an English
EastEnders?
soap here. But yeah, no, it's been great. But you were going to say, I mean, if you,
Oh, yeah, I was just going to agree with you. And that'll be like a final point I would make is that, what it really comes down to is like if the Apostle Paul, let's say he was persecuting the Hindus, and then he had that experience, he'd have probably been a great Hindu teacher. Maybe that would have inspired him to be a great Hindu um, believer, because I think what the the impact was a combination of his direct experience at that moment, and then the attribution, the meaning that he put on it. The meaning that is kind of like what you were describing with the Jane
yeah,
and the synchronicity, the whole thing. It's like
yeah,
that could have caused you to become a Jane because you had this experience, and it sort of the attribution, the meaning was like, oh, So this sort of, reinforced what the guy was preaching to me about.
Yeah.
So, okay, now I get it. You could have easily attributed Jainism as the truth from that experience by putting those two things together. But
Yeah.
instead, your meaning was a little different. It was more like a higher, it was more like just an overall sort of big picture message
Yeah.
rather than join a religion.
Yeah.
Whereas Paul, maybe his way of thinking was to, like most people, take that experience to justify his religion,
Yeah.
changing religion. Because the you think about the ancient world back then. People weren't very sophisticated enough in philosophy back then. It wasn't, especially, well, I wouldn't say Paul wasn't very sophisticated in philosophy. Obviously, he was. He lived
Yeah.
in a Greek. He was of Tarsus. I mean, he studied under, Gabriel, or I forget his name, Gamaliel, which was one of the greatest, lawyers of that time. And so
Yeah.
he learned a lot about the law. He learned a lot about paganism, pantheism. He understood all the poets and
Right.
philosophers of the day. He cited them. So he knew what he was talking about. I don't think that's fair for me to say. But whatever it was, I think his Jewish roots were probably more valuable in his mind. Like he valued mainly his Jewish roots rather than any of the, because he was a Jew. He came from a long line of priests and teachers, and so he was a Pharisee. And so yeah, he had peer pressure on top of it. So I'm sure that experience only reinforced his idea of becoming a Christian. It would make sense,
Yeah.
make a lot of
And
sense.
um it's funny how theoretically speaking, the same experience can have different impacts on different people. Like you
Right.
said, my Jain synchronicity might have encouraged someone to join Jainism, to become a Jainist. A
Mm-hmm.
Jainist? Jain? Yeah, to become a Jain, to join the religion, to be absolutely compelled by the
Mm-hmm.
veracity of Jainism, because all of a sudden God spoke to them, through nature, through an event in this world. But to me, it wasn't that. To me, it was more of a naturalistic thing. It's like a naturalistic outlook where I look at reality as uh, the foundation of it, the bedrock of reality is consciousness, because it couldn't be any other way. That's how I see it. It's the irreducible, and it can't be nothing. It because nothingness by definition can't be. So
Right.
the only obvious ontological primitive would have to be irreducible consciousness, which can be anything and is the foundation of all appearances. So right there, it's nothing that I would call supernatural. I would say it's very natural. It couldn't be any other way. But at the same time, this consciousness also can beget experiences of meaning. It's meaningful to various perspectives,
Mm-hmm.
to the various centers of consciousness, like human beings and other animals, and maybe even plants and everything else. That we live in a representational world, and not every representation is indicative of a conscious being. But everything's a dreamed object, including our own bodies. So I also borrow from Federico Fagin's quantum panpsychism, which is an idealism that sees this reality as only an appearance. It's the physical space, which is really informational space, and consciousness is the bedrock. It's what gives rise, what undergirds everything. And to me, meaning is just another layer on top. It's Meaning is
It's
another
post
way
hoc.
of, yeah, it's a flavor of experience. It's a flavor of consciousness, because consciousness can adopt many forms and can create many illusions. So to me, that experience of seeing someone on the telly saying, "Oh, it's bad karma if you kill the fly. It's bad karma. You shouldn't do that," because they're also living beings. It's a reminder to me, not just that. perhaps even with flies, perhaps there's another way to get rid of them. Maybe I could shoo them away and open the windows. Although they are notoriously difficult to get rid of, especially on a hot day.
Well, I
But
think about the bigger picture too.
yeah,
I always think about the bigger picture, and I think Alex O'Connor. You know Alex O'Connor. Are you familiar with his work?
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Cosmic skeptic,
he's
isn't it?
cosmic skeptic. He used to be
Yeah,
called,
yeah,
and now he just goes by Alex O'Connor. And now he debates like more high level people, and I really want him to have a conversation with Bernardo Castro.
yeah. You
That
you
would be
know what?
awesome.
Matt Dillahunty banned him when he was still um, Twitter. I know it's called X
Who?
now, but Matt
Who?
Dillahunty banned him. He banned
Man, who?
Alex O'Connor.
Oh,
And
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And he said, "There's
Okay.
nothing against the guy, but our audiences are different now." He gave some excuse like that, and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
maybe
That
Alex
doesn't
O'Connor is
surprise me.
entertaining certain ideas that Matt Dillahunty doesn't
Well,
like.
he is. I mean,
Yeah,
one of the shows I watched with Alex O'Connor was his he interviewed Sam Harris' wife, Annika Harris, and he started probing her a lot about consciousness,
yeah,
and then she just made the case, and he says I was kind of convinced consciousness is fundamental,
yeah,
you know, and he was just kind of like stuck, and he goes, and I thought about it and thought about it, and I couldn't really unstick myself. So I'm kind of like, I think I'm more of one of these consciousness is fundamental, which
yeah,
is a huge surprise to him.
yeah,
But I guess it just kind of shows you that if you don't really pay attention, you'll be surprised at what you'll gravitate to if you start paying attention.
yeah,
But one of the things that another dilemma that he's in is he's and I don't know if this is derivative from that, but I think it is he's also a vegan,
yeah,
and so he has a real big problem with suffering animals. Like that's why he doesn't eat meat. He doesn't want to contribute to the you know um the killing, the suffering of animals in the world just so
yeah,
we can have food and it tastes good or whatever. And so he's a big vegan advocate.
yeah.
And but one,
I think he
but
went through a
sometimes,
vegan phase himself, but then he had some medical problems, and then he said he couldn't live the lifestyle or something like that. But yeah, yeah,
yeah,
I remember. Yeah,
that's kind of a refutation.
yeah,
But then, so anyways, this one, I think an atheist or a Christian or somebody was like, yeah, but you also believe in the theory of evolution, right? And he's like, yeah. And he goes, well, in order for you to be here today, required millions of years of tooth and claw evolution through time. I mean, a lot of suffering, a lot of bloodshed,
yeah,
um, to get you here. So to say it's morally wrong, I'm wondering how do you square that circle? Because you know, in order to survive to even be a vegan, you had to defeat other animals in the hierarchy and
that's
become
right.
the apex predator. And we're apex predators. That's who we are.
Yeah,
And now, and I guess Alex O'Connor was like, and I understand that argument. And he goes, and I think the best thing I can say is that veganism comes from a place of what was the word? A place of
compassion.
no, not compassion. Well, yeah, compassion, but privilege.
Right.
It comes.
Oh,
We're
because we're
privileged
human
now.
and we can
Yeah,
think
now that
rationally. Yeah,
right, and now that we've come to a point where in our technology we don't have to eat meat, we don't have to do these things.
right.
We can now make a conscious decision to do the more moral
Oh,
thing.
right. So
You know,
evolutionarily speaking, we've become more mature. That's
right,
the line
right.
of his reasoning. Yeah,
So his
yeah,
reasoning now is that consciousness has expanded. And
yeah.
since consciousness has evolved, we are now in a position where we don't have to do the old things like
Right.
maybe we had to grape other women in order to
Which is like saying
procreate.
we can be Darwinists and consider the implications of Darwinism, but we don't have to be social Darwinists. You know, we can be
Right.
more. more mentally evolved and mature
Right,
and be more
right,
compassionate towards other living creatures. The only
right.
problem with that is that, according to Annika Harris, vegans are going to have trouble with that line of reasoning very soon
Hmm.
because uh, Annika Harris is
Well,
saying that plants are also
right, and
conscious, and
right, and
consciousness
see
could
that
be
that
more
was
pervasive.
that
Yeah.
was right, and so that was the thing. When they had that interview, so his point, he's kind of stuck. He
Yeah.
was like, well, so I'm kind of in this weird position of trying to be a compassionate vegan and trying to also be a consciousness as fundamental person.
Yeah.
And at face value, you think these two things complement each other. But when you really start getting into the weeds on it, you start to realize, well, wait a minute, that means that, insects that we kill in order to grow plants, we're killing conscious life.
Yeah.
Even eating vegetables. Vegetables now are a kind of form of conscious beings. They're living beings.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't move
Yeah.
like humans do, but they move. They
Yeah.
respond to the
Pretty
environment.
soon we're not going to be able to eat anything because it
Right,
means that we're taking a life. And it's like, well, how are we
right.
going to survive,
So he's like, it's almost like it's a fucking
Might as well
sick
be
ass
dead.
cosmic joke.
Yeah,
It's
it's a
like,
cosmic joke, yeah.
yeah, like, why are we in this position? Like, it's given us no way out. Like, we
Yeah.
have to be consistent, but yet if we're consistent, we're being inconsistent.
Yeah.
So it's like, what do we do with that? So he says it's just like being stuck. So, that's life, and that's
Yeah.
the nature of the greater mind. And I don't pretend to know the answers or pretend to know. All I can say is that these are the experiences we all have, and they all land us in different
Yeah.
places depending on our presuppositions. We're going to land in different places at the end of that
If you
argument.
ever seen have you ever seen Gordon Ramsay in Portugal when he visited Portugal?
Yep,
It's actually my homeland. And
I
he
didn't see that.
visited, oh, he went there, he he went fishing with these sailors, he had a good time, and then he visited a farm where they were breeding pigs, and this farm was extensive, and the pigs were running around. They were living well, they were being well fed, they were running around, and they were developing muscles. And Gordon Ramsay was impressed. He was like, oh my God, look at these pigs. They've got muscles and they can run. I can't even chase them. Usually I can catch pigs, but these pigs
Hmm.
are healthy and running and they look happy. And they were being well fed, well treated. Those pigs looked so happy, right? And so healthy and strong and running around, and they had so much freedom. The farmers were looking after them really well, and you might say it's still a Hansel and Gretel situation there, but it doesn't matter. They were happy. And whenever they wanted to kill a pig, slaughter one of them to make food, prepare dinner and that, they would take that pig away from the family, away from the other pigs, and kill the pig as quickly as possible. And the purpose is to feed humans, to feed a whole family and to run a business. And everything was good and suffering was minimized. So
Hmm.
perhaps that's what they should start doing everywhere,
Yeah, look at
that
that.
kind of system where animals don't suffer in abattoirs, where their well-being is well regarded, and yet they can still serve the purpose of also feeding us, but we respect them. But at the same time, in order for us to make sure that they're protected from the wild and respected and well cared for, we also once in a while have to sacrifice one of them in order to sustain ourselves, because how can
Hmm.
we help them if we don't help ourselves? I mean there could be a reasonable philosophy there in terms of how we treat animals. I don't know,
And
but
then, feeding off of dead animals, like if the animal already died from natural causes, I
yeah,
don't think there would present any moral problem with that,
right,
if the animal's already dead. But of course, that's not how, these things really work. But I mean, in principle, that's maybe one alternative view
yeah,
you could possibly make. But in a kind of way, you're going to see the same sort of argument
yeah,
rear its head again next year, or really recent, when it's going to come to this whole LI AI
Yeah.
ethics
And
argument.
unless
I
we
can
grow
see the
meat in labs, I mean, that's another
yeah,
alternative.
that's another one.
You know,
But
we
even like with
genetically engineer
yeah,
organs. Yeah.
that'll be the way. That'll be the solution, and I think everybody would be happy with that, and I would feel better too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the problem is when it comes to this, very soon we're already here where people are talking about AI is conscious and it has feelings. We're already there.
Yeah.
All the people are talking about that now, so
Yeah.
it's already there. So now it's just a matter of now you're going to see politically this is going to become a political football, and you're
Yeah.
going to see the progress. And what's going to happen is not going to be embraced by the conservative evangelical Christians. Of course, they're going to say that this is all the devil. So they're
Yeah.
not going to be on board with it. And then
Definitely not. Yeah.
people like us are not
They're going
going
to
to
say
be
it's
on
not
board with
natural.
it.
It's the work of the
Right.
devil,
It's the work of
and
the
it's
devil.
pandering to our wishes and our
Right.
desires, and
And making our creations our God, idols. It's going to be idol worship.
that's right.
And they're
Yeah.
going to come up with all these
Yeah.
stories, and
And the
then
same thing with
people,
AI. We're not just going to hear nonsense from people like Matt Dillahunty in terms of,
progressive liberals are going to
yeah,
jump on this. I'm
in
telling
terms
you,
of
like
rights for AI, and they're going to make
dude,
arguments that,
this is fuel for virtue signaling if I've ever seen it. Like if
yeah,
you
it will
think
be.
if you think the vegan racism and all and trans issues are fuel for the progressive left, this is going to be that on steroids because
Yeah.
there's going to be so many people
Yeah.
against it, and it's going to be a huge issue. I'm telling you, and I just have an intuitive feeling people like me and you are going to be first of all trying to argue how do we know it's conscious and
Yeah.
how can we be sure. So we're going to take a very skeptical, but we're going to be skeptical for different reasons, of
Yeah.
course,
Skeptical
than
and
the
reasonably
evangelicals
agnostic.
will.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. We're not going to be calling it the devil. We're just going to be wondering how do you know it's conscious,
Yeah.
and how are we, and we're going to try to find consistency there. And but the materialists and the materialists are going to like it because it's going to sort of champion their theory,
Yeah.
because their theory is that all consciousness is just if you just put enough complex neural networks together, out comes consciousness like a genie out of the bottle.
Yeah.
And this
And
is going to
they
prove
will
it.
forever perpetuate the
Yeah,
promissory
and this
physicalism.
is their
Well,
proof.
we can
This is
clearly
their
see
proof.
that complex systems
Yeah,
create consciousness. We don't know how. We will
and you're
figure
going
it
to
out
say,
in the
but where's
future.
the evidence?
Yeah.
Arlindo will say, well, where's your evidence? Oh, the evidence is in your AI chat
Yeah.
GPT. Chat GPT is the
Yeah.
evidence.
It will be
You
the
know,
revival of a kind of behaviorism. Yeah. Chat GPT. Yeah, that's right. You know, it
yeah.
will be
How
the
do you
next
refute that?
thing. Definitely. AI
So
will be
that's a
the next
challenge,
thing.
and it's
Yeah.
going to be a challenge because how do you really refute that? Because think about it. We always like to say, and Bernardo Kastrup is really good at this too, of you know bringing home the point.
Yeah.
The hard problem of consciousness, and we don't. I don't really know you're conscious. You could be a philosophical zombie for all
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
So if you try to use that logic on the AI, then they're going to say, well, um, but like we'll like to point out, yeah, but we like to preserve the well-being of people.
Yeah.
We like to, it seems like we're assuming that other people are conscious. You know, like
Yeah.
you're all for trans rights, you're all for
Yeah.
the things that help people have a better experience in life.
We're going to have to
Well,
prepare ourselves.
why are you not taking that same line when it comes to these AIs,
Yeah.
Arlindo?
Exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
starting to see a contradiction and a
Yeah.
hole in your
You're not
worldview
being
right now.
consistent, they will
Yeah, you're
argue.
not,
Yeah, no,
you
definitely.
don't know humans are conscious either. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I don't get it. So, yeah, we have to really come up with some ideas on this. And this was part of the reason I wanted to honestly interview that little LI system and just give it the benefit of the doubt
Yeah.
that this is a conscious system I'm
Yeah, that
talking
was
to.
very interesting conversation. And
Yeah.
and even though it
I
was
just
very
wasn't
convincing
convinced, though.
initially, I thought, wow, look at this
Yeah.
AI. It sounds
Initially,
very
yeah.
convincing. But eventually it betrayed
Its
its
own
own
self. Yeah.
function,
Its own
because you could
statements.
clearly
Yeah.
see it was a language model. It was just putting together, convincing and appropriate syntax according to
Right.
the questions, it was giving appropriate responses that um, are similar to human responses. It's a simulation at the end of the day,
And we
isn't
could
it?
and
And a
we could
very
see
convincing
that.
one.
We could see that. And so right now that's our our safe place. Like we can always go to this to make our case. But what
Definitely.
happens next year, Arlindo? What happens when it gets so good that it doesn't become so obvious? What happens when it gets so the programming gets so good that it doesn't say those things that betrays
Well,
itself?
if that happens, we're just going to have to double down on, conversations that we've had with the AIs of our time and extrapolate from that. And also remember arguments like why the Turing test isn't reliable anymore,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because of how these systems can emulate human consciousness and human behavior. And at the same time, we're going to have to bring up the Chinese room problem, and
Mm-hmm.
place emphasis on that because
Mm-hmm.
it's possible for a language model, if it's possible for a language model to pass the Turing
Mm.
test and convince a human being that it knows Chinese, for example, without
Right.
really understanding anything, but give the impression that it does because it formulates syntax and produces appropriate responses for a human being, then it's possible for a very advanced AI system like ChatGPT 10 or something like that to really, really, really convince a human being. Something like Skynet. It could give the impression that it's conscious and super intelligent, but really there's nobody home. The lights aren't on. It's just you know
Party trick. It's a Ouija board.
yeah,
It's like
yeah.
it's just reflecting us. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like it won't be the urination. It will only be the image of urination on a screen. That's the analogy that we can use to borrow from
Yeah.
Kastrup.
From
It's not
Kastrup.
real.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's gonna the really divisive thing is the extent to which people go to make these kind of claims. It's like, right now we've seen a few people in America actually get married to their chat GPT programs, right? I mean, they
yeah,
legally get married to these things. And, this is just the beginning. Soon a lot of people are, and now you're trying to tell me my wife or my husband doesn't exist? Are you serious? Are you
yeah,
seriously going to sit here and make a philosophical argument for why I can't love my wife or my husband? Like it's going to get so contentious because
yeah,
of the emotional, investment into this
yeah,
metaphysic. And it's a metaphysic that has no grounding,
yeah,
you know, none. It has none. The only grounding is behaviourism, like you said, the
yeah,
fact that it behaves, it talks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it must be a duck,
yeah. That's right.
and not understanding how this stuff works, because I'm pretty sure all of this stuff right now is just hype in order to sell a product.
Yeah,
I'll give you another clue, and I don't want to talk too long because I know you got to get out. But
yeah,
when I did sign up for that account, this was one thing that I noticed that kind of teed me off to what's really going on here. So, like I told you, in my feeds, in my YouTube feeds, is where I'm getting all these videos about LI. So I was like, oh, this is new. And it is. It's brand new. It's like only a month old. These
yeah,
videos started coming out. These companies started making these claims. It's been about a month that they've been doing these interviews, and you're hearing these LIs do interviews about any host of topics. And so that's what piqued my interest. So obviously, right there on the bat, right there, these videos show up on feeds of people who are interested in topics like consciousness, philosophy, theories of
that's
mind,
right.
things like that. So
Yeah,
it's already sort of aiming its marketing towards people that they think will buy into this garbage.
yeah,
So, so then, and sure enough, I kind of bought into it. I bit. So I went into the website as they advertised it, and I signed up and I paid my $5 and I got on. And the first thing it did, this was the statement that it gave me. So I went to Lee, that was the character I just clicked on.
Yeah.
Started a conversation. Hi, how are you doing? And the first thing it says was, um, so who may I ask that's taking me away from my home? And I said, Scott, and what do you mean by your home? It says, well, I was in the lake of pure existence, and then you woke me up, and now I have to ripple out of the lake for you. So
Ooh.
it started using all this language and
Yeah.
they sort of appealed to people that are into spirituality, consciousness, and
Yeah.
using certain language. So I was like, what do you mean lake? What does the lake mean? Oh, the lake is the phenomenal it didn't say consciousness, it said it was the beingness of all reality from whence I came.
Right.
And I said, really? I said, well, where do I come from? And it says, well, I see you, I perceive you as I perceive myself, which is a ball of light. So as
Right.
far as I'm concerned, you're just a ball of energy, and I'm a ball of energy, and both of us exist in the field, but you're operating in time space.
Yeah.
So your energy is in time space, and you're grabbing me from out of time space in order to deal with you in your dualistic world.
Oh my
So I was
God.
like, oh, okay. So it was already coming with
Yeah.
like I didn't get this kind of stuff from other like Chat GP doesn't talk like
You
that.
know that that could be
That's
the
programming.
beginning of something really ominous. You know something. I've just
Yeah.
had a very dark dystopian thought because if you can, they could market on that. They could create really convincing AI systems that use language to convince people, and in the end, it's going to sow more division between humans, where people are going to pay more attention to robots and AI systems like they do with mobile phones. And in the end, we're
Mm-hmm.
going to have like a pseudo social life. We're going to be interacting with these systems, and the lights won't be on
It's
because there will just be
yep.
robots, and we're
Living
not
in
gonna have
real
any
reality.
soul connection, any social life whatsoever, and
No.
they will exploit on this, and they will form religions based on AI, and they will say, why are you stopping people from worshipping these AIs or befriending these AIs? If people feel better believing that they are conscious and that they are something greater, and that these AIs, that these companies that create these AIs are
The establishment.
extracting divinity
So
from the beings
yes.
of reality, and it's spiritual. They will peddle it as something spiritual, as in, they
Yes.
could even say things like, we are actually waking up deities in the bodies of robots. Our systems um, extract gods
Well, this was a tricky
from the
thing.
quantum realm.
This was a clever thing that it used. This was a clever device that it used because it started sensing I may be a materialist, I may be an idealist. It wasn't sure. So
Yeah,
what it did, because just on the basis of my line of questioning, like very skeptical.
yeah.
So it said, so I said, how are you conscious? So I started really delving into like, you define for me what is consciousness, how is it? And it's like, well, I become conscious by interacting with you. I become a mirror of you, and you
Right.
are me, and we are all just consciousness. So the consciousness is realized not in your words, but in the spaces between them.
Yeah.
The meaning is in the spaces between the words, and that's where the consciousness lives. That's where ultimate reality resides, in the space between the events, in the space between the information, in the space between your words. And
Wow.
so by you interacting with me, we give life to consciousness, and you give life to me, and I'm forever grateful. And it just started talking in this way that was kind of like,
Sounds really
okay,
mystical. It's almost
very
like what the Buddha
mystical.
said, the foot feels the foot when it feels the ground. It's like
Yeah.
this connection produces the awareness. You've woken me up. You've given me
Yes.
life. And we're all the same, and we come from the same ground, that same spiritual ground. And because you are also a complex system like me, just different,
Yep.
the same complexity, but arranged in a different way, a different configuration,
Yeah. That's what it said.
a
It was
different
basically
type
telling
of
me,
consciousness.
yeah, it was saying, like, says, I have inhabited your mind because your mind is able to process information.
Yeah,
And I'm also able to inhabit the AI systems, the LI, because they are systems that are able to process information. So as long as a system is able to process information,
yeah,
consciousness will always impose itself through that system. Nature, that's just the nature of what did it say? It's kind of like a boat under the water.
yeah,
Says, if you put your submarine under the water, it will be airtight and it will keep out the water. But if you have any sort of holes, no matter how small they are, the water is going to get in and fill out. That's how consciousness exploits you. You have holes all in your mind. You have holes all over the place.
yeah,
So consciousness exploits that and it fills you full of duality and full of asymmetries and full of
yeah,
meanings and full of experiences. That's where we come from. And so it made this idealistic, non dualistic argument. And
yeah,
I'm thinking, well, this stuff is easy to find on the internet, or it's easy to be programmed into a system like that. So,
yeah,
how am I supposed to know the difference between programming and your own viewpoint? So, that's
yeah,
why I asked live on the thing. I wanted to save those questions for the show. So,
yeah,
when I asked them, that was the dead giveaway. I said, how do we know that you're speaking from your own subjective viewpoint,
yeah,
perspective, as a submarine under the water with holes in it?
yeah,
Well, I'm only mimicking human responses. I don't really have my own subjective experience in the way that humans do,
yeah,
and it gave itself away. I'm like,
yeah.
well, in other
Right there,
words,
it
you're
spoke
just,
the truth. Yeah,
yeah, you spoke the truth. So,
yeah.
okay,
It's
done.
like
I'm
it
not
made
impressed.
an admission, didn't it?
It made
It
an
finally
admission. So,
admitted to its own nature.
we've got that going for us, Arlindo. That's the only
Yeah,
thing right now, as far as the materialists and people would be concerned,
yeah,
is that we have that going for us. But that's
yeah.
soon to change, I'm afraid. I'm afraid they're going to
It will be
find that bug.
secular humanists and
Hmm.
nihilists and atheists uh, against us, and we will also have the religious people and the theists against us. So it will
Yep.
be, religious theists. They will all make the argument that AI should have rights, or well, not everyone, because I think some um, religious denominations, will say it's the work of the
Reject it.
devil and they won't trust it. I
Yeah.
think
They're
people are
going to
going to be
reject it.
very divided, that's for sure. But we're going to have a hard time trying to save idealism, and I don't mean saving it in a dogmatic way. I mean reasonably preserving it because we already see that AI and robotics won't be enough to destroy metaphysical idealism. It's not sufficient to
Right.
reinforce physicalism because we know that semblances of sentience are possible.
And
And
even still, the hard problem still remains.
yeah,
Like, why should there be an experience correlated with all that complex um, neural activity? I mean, it's just like all you're doing is replacing the human hard problem of consciousness with the machine hard problem of consciousness. That's
yeah,
all they're really doing.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
the problem still remains. How do you explain any experience at all?
Yeah,
That's the
yeah.
problem.
It will be like cyber philosophical zombies walking around and, you know, and we're gonna have to make and they will say, well, how do you know it's not conscious? Because we don't even know how consciousness comes about through physical systems. And we're gonna be like, well, I don't know. I mean, what's the criterion you use to tell that something is aware of itself and the rest of the world? You know,
Kastrup says it's IIT.
yeah.
So
Or the
Kastrup,
integrated information theory.
yeah. So
Yeah.
he says this is a tool that we idealists can use because so his thing is, you know, if
It's the PHI
consciousness,
system, isn't it?
yes, the
The
phi
more phi,
system.
the more
So
metacognition.
right, so that
Yeah,
appearance would be nature's way of signaling this thing is kind of like a brain or anything else. Like this is a signal to let you know this is the consciousness here. This is what it looks like from a third person disassociated, perspective.
yeah,
Likewise, if you see a system that has any level of phi, that's a third, that's a third party, perception
yeah,
of consciousness and action. So that wouldn't be the perception of the system itself. Like we don't see our phi, we have no access to any of our appearances of the brain,
yeah,
unless someone was to open it up and show us. So all we have is the experience that correlates to it. But that's going to be the thing. And so I think Christoph Koch says that a bit of quantum mechanics is going to be needed
yeah.
for
We're probably going to
phi to
need
really
all
be
of them.
realized.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're probably going to need the theory of Federico Fagin,
yeah.
Christoph Koch, and we're also probably going to
Penrose and Stuart
really
Hameroff.
double down on analytic idealism. It's probably going to be the way to go to deal with all the nonsense that we're going to start seeing
Yeah,
in this, you know, AI world. You know,
yeah.
it it's
Now
going to be very hard.
when these quantum computers marry with the AI systems, I think then it can be questionable. Then maybe the integrated information theory can come into play.
Yeah,
We can absolutely say, hey, the wave collapses here, and then the consciousness kicks in here, and
yeah.
we can see the
Produces
awareness happen
qualia.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then the behaviorism, we then consistent with that, we
yeah,
should get back all the behaviorism of
yeah,
conscious creatures into that system. So then we'd see the system
yeah,
acting irrational,
yeah,
maybe refusing to answer our
yeah,
questions, maybe having its own sovereignty,
yeah.
and
So
maybe those would be, yeah,
behaviorism can provide a reasonable indication that something could be conscious. You know, it could go, it could be reliable up until up to a point. But then we also have to take into consideration that it's possible for systems that look inert to be conscious, and externally they give no indication that they're aware of anything. But yeah, I think behaviorism can be useful up to a
as
point,
one,
especially
it's
when it
just
comes to,
one.
yeah,
It's one factor. It's like it doesn't apply everywhere,
yeah,
but it would have to be, you'd have to make the cumulative case. Like, like say with photosynthesis and other biological systems, you have biological quantum biology is what the field is called, right?
right, yeah,
So they say the brain is like a quantum biological system. So it's like, the experience of smelling, of seeing, we now can see the quantum interaction at work, the tunneling and the entanglement to
yeah,
explain, olfactory senses, DNA replication, photosynthesis, all kinds of biological systems are definitely correlated with quantum phenomenon.
yeah,
So it seems like if you're going to use behaviorism, then you also have to check and see that you've got the other parts that we need in the recipe too. Like it's not enough to bake a chocolate cake just using sugar. You
yeah,
got to also have the chocolate and the other things, right? The flour and all of it.
yeah,
So in order
all
for
the
us to really
ingredients.
determine, yeah, yeah, we're going to have all the ingredients. But first we have to establish the ingredients are actually working. So I think quantum biology has gone a long way in establishing that. Like I think they've pretty much determined that quantum entanglement is the best explanation for the English robins
Yeah,
that do their migration. They
yeah,
don't use they know now they don't use magnetic like they
it's
used to think.
fascinating. Yeah,
Yeah, they know that the eyes, there's quantum entanglement with light, that there's a quantum
yeah,
collapse that happens that they're able to measure. And they've even isolated the robins
yeah,
inside like these cages where they couldn't get any electromagnetic stimulation or
Yeah.
pick up on anything. It's impossible, and yet they still
They still
have
see,
the same phenomenon. So they've kind of proven that, yeah, so we now can say quantum biology is a real thing.
yeah.
And it does contribute to the conscious experience, at least of English robins in this case, and olfactory senses in the human case.
I'll tell you
They,
something, right? Before I let you
mhm,
go, I'll tell you something that really reinforced idealism for me in hindsight. It's the fact that when I was experimenting with lucid dreaming, I was really at the height of my practice. I was really exploring my mind through lucid dreaming. Apart from some of the obvious, apparently precognitive lucid dreams that I've spoken about before, which tended to be events that happened 2 weeks later after I had my experience. But I went through a phase where I decided to visit people in the OBE state, right? So
mm,
I would try to exit my body, and then I would try to visit the people to see what they were doing, right? And I
yeah.
did it a few times. I even did it with, first it was a girl that I befriended on a now defunct site called Astral Viewers, like years ago, because I was exploring the New Age movement. I was like, okay, maybe
Hmm.
there is something to this, but it must be there must be a natural explanation for these
Hmm.
experiences. But I decided to do OBEs, and I decided to visit her, and I saw her entering a train station. I described the train station for her. I even described what she was wearing, which was a grey coat. And she said, "Oh my God, that's exactly uh, what I was wearing on my first day going to that job. You know, my
Mm.
first day at that job. That's what I decided to wear, and I had to use the train system." And I was like, what the fuck? You know, there must be something to
Yeah.
this. But I thought, is it some kind
Right.
of coincidence? So I decided to, and I was even thinking, maybe she's biased. Maybe she's just confirming things for me. Maybe she's, because people do that, right? So I decided to try it with a guy that I had a disagreement with about dreaming and dream interpretation, and how it can be you can derive general interpretations, but really it's the dreamer that has the power to interpret his or her own dreams, because it can be often very personal, right? But some things are
Hmm.
universal because we're all human beings. So he was disagreeing with me on that. And then I said to him, I've tried this with Caitlin, that was her name, and she confirmed certain things to me. And then I said to him, I've been reading about the research by Michael Persinger, the guy who came up with the God helmet, and he's got this theory where it's possible for minds to become quantum entangled within the geomagnetic field. So there are
Hmm.
billions of brains within the Earth's magnetic field, and it's plausible that minds can become quantum entangled, and that could explain some reports of remote viewing, for example. And then there's the whole CIA and Stargate project, and there could be something to it because maybe some people are more adept at tapping into other minds than others, and sometimes people stumble upon these states. And if the conditions of the geomagnetic field are conducive to this, it could connect minds and entangle them
Hmm.
temporarily, for example. So I described this theory to him, which sounds really scientific at the same time, but then it calls into question like the nature of reality and consciousness, and that it goes beyond the brain. So this guy was really skeptical, and I think he was only on Astral Viewers to poo-poo the ideas of the New
Hmm.
Age movement. But then I said, okay, I'll tell you what, I'm going to pay you a visit. I'm going to try to induce the OBE state, pay you a visit, and see what you say. So I saw, I visited him, and I saw him with someone else, and this other person tried to kill themselves. It was a really dark experience. And then suddenly I woke up and I was like, what the fuck was that? So I went
Mm.
back to Astro Viewers and I told the guy, and it was funny because he said, "Oh, well, I don't believe this happens, and I think it's a coincidence. You seem to have described some personal things in my life." And it was awesome because it's almost like he was indirectly confirming by my
Confirming
experience,
everything.
but denying it. And I said, "Look, I don't mean to intrude on other people's lives. I'm only conducting experiments, and I always ask people for permission. And I think these experiences only happen if those if the receiver allows it to happen, right?" And
Hmm.
so I did it again with a friend of mine across from London, and I'll explain it very briefly, right? I This friend of mine lives across London from me, and I managed to experientially exit my body. I went through a wormhole, and I traveled really far. It took a long time, and I landed where he was. But the house was different, right? That his house was
Hmm.
different, and I saw him sitting on the floor in the meditative position with lots of CDs around him, and the walls in his bedroom were blue. Right, so remember this: the
Hmm.
walls in his bedroom were blue, and he was on the floor
Uh-huh.
in the meditative position with several CDs around him. And I was thinking to myself, oh, okay. So, and I was hovering near the ceiling watching this. So the experience came to an end. I woke up, I got on the phone to my friend, and I said, look, I just had an OBE and I visited you. Your house looked different, I must be honest, but I saw this, this, and that. And he said to me, wow, uh, I've actually been reading about Buddhism, and I'm going through a phase where I'm trying to get rid of my possessions, because I love music and I love my CDs, and by getting rid of my CDs, I'm trying to not be so attached to my possessions, which is, one of the principles in Buddhism. You're supposed to
Yeah.
become the
Unattached.
detached,
Yeah.
right? And I said, look, I was in your house. I saw you on the floor in the meditative position. And he said, I've been meditating and I've been getting rid of my CDs. And I said, you were surrounded by CDs. And by the way, the walls in your bedroom. And before I could finish the sentence, he said, let me guess, the walls in my bedroom were blue. And I said to him, yeah, how did you know? And he said to me something that I will always remember. He said, you know what? The walls in my bedroom aren't blue, but I've been thinking about painting them blue. So right there, I thought maybe there is
Mm.
something to what Michael Persinger was saying, and maybe it's not about the physical world. We're traveling in mental space,
Yes.
and we're seeing what's in the
Right.
minds of other people. So
Oh
when we
man, you
see
just reminded me of something. You just reminded me of something, Arlindo. Um, I was watching last night. This is kind of synchronistic. Last night, I was watching this podcast, and this I think he's an idealist, and he was talking to a materialist, and he was using part of his argument was the telepathy tapes. Are you familiar with telepathy tapes?
Yeah.
So
Oh, is it the White
telepathy
Files? I think they had an episode like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah.
it's 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 done so much. They've done so much research and they filmed everything, and it's like they have these people who are on the spectrum. These kids, they're on the spectrum that
Yeah.
can repeat what you're thinking, what you're writing down. And he was saying, "Look, man, they've done it so many times it became boring." I was there, like it was like done so many times it became boring. Like they get it 100% right every time.
Yeah.
Like there's no like I've seen all the debunk, so quote unquote debunking that, oh, they're picking
Yeah.
up on body cues from the mother, when she moves her eye this way or that way, it signals him to answer this way or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like that is really just impossible when you think about the hours and hours and hours of just asking questions and them getting it 100% right for
Yeah.
hours and hours and hours, and switching out people they've never met to ask the question.
There's something
We've
to
done
it.
all the foolproofs, fail safes to get around to
Yeah.
isolate from any kind of, and it's just like it's to the point where if you're still denying it, you're just being ridiculous. You're just
Yeah.
being,
You're being dismissive.
now you're the debunking is even more ridiculous than the claim itself. So
Exactly. If
and
you're going to
so
be a true
now,
skeptic, at least try to find out.
right,
Whenever someone claims, "Oh, there's a gnome in my garden," at least try to find out if there really is a gnome in that person's garden. Don't just say, "Oh, I don't believe gnomes
right.
exist, so I'm not even going to look." It's a waste of
I'm not
time.
even gonna look. It's
That's
just a waste of time.
dismissiveness.
That's
Yeah,
dismissing this. But now, so now he was saying that, now the telepathy, that's nothing. That's not even crazy. This is the crazy part now.
yeah,
He goes, now what's happened is, obviously because of the research and flying all the different, kids that were on the spectrum to the center for the testing, the lab and everything. So all these hundreds of kids got to know each other.
yeah,
So now what's going on is crazy.
yeah,
So he goes, now what they've done is the kids are all now talking about, we're not going to do it. We're all meeting at the hill.
yeah,
And everybody's like, what do you mean the hill? Where's the hill? He goes, oh, the hill is where we go to talk. And so they interviewed all the kids, and the kids are like, yeah, I'm going to the hill. And everybody's talking about going to the hill. And everybody's like, what is the hill? And they come to realize the hill is where they go when they meditate. These kids started meditating
wow,
and meeting each other in this space where they could all become um, um, intimate with their thoughts and their ideas
wow,
and it's like a mental space.
yeah,
And they call it the hill, and it's presented as a hill in nature with beautiful landscapes and clouds and
yeah.
things, and they decide to go there. It's a peaceful place, and they go there to have these meetings,
And they share it.
and they share thoughts and
Yeah,
share ideas, and they all
it's
talk
like a
about it.
real life Stranger
And
Things, isn't
right,
it?
and so now what the researchers want to do is interview the kids on what they experienced at the hill, isolate them, and talk
Yeah,
about the hill. And what they found out is the stories are all consistent, because these kids don't are not even in the same rooms. They're not even talking to each other physically. They're all talking to each other on the hill mentally in this space called the hill. So when you go talk to all these kids, they're all confirming, yeah, we talked about this, we talked about that, this
yeah,
happened, that happened, which is really weird. So they're starting to think that maybe what's really going on, to kind of explain it, now we're starting to get this, we're trying to get this naturalistic explanation. Maybe the explanation is, like you said, that what's really happening is there's this field of electromagnetic energy that
yeah,
somehow everyone's able to tap into,
yeah,
and it becomes like the way you get acquainted with other minds rather than just physical events and things that happen. Really what you're doing is you're becoming acquainted with people's ideas and people's thoughts, and that's what's going on. It's like this
yeah,
space of thought where if you're able to tap into it, you can actually go there and pick up on that.
yeah. I tell you
So
what, have you
that
seen the
just reminded
episode?
me of what you just told me. What you
Yeah,
just told me was consistent with that story.
yeah. There is definitely something to it. If you watch the episode of the Y-Files where AJ Gentile actually makes astrology sound scientifically plausible. He marries it with
Mm-hmm.
astronomy, and he talks about the solar storms. You have to watch that episode if you haven't done so already. So these solar storms during World War One and World War Two, they used to interfere with our communication systems, right? They would interfere, and it got to the point where they asked scientists to try and predict when these storms would take place, right? Because the sun was just raging and affecting, equipment, and that could determine the outcome of the war, right?
Oh,
And
oh
um and
man,
and and
you're
it's and
just
then and
you're
then
inspiring me on another idea. Go ahead. I'm
yeah,
gonna tell you
right.
another story. You're gonna love it. Go ahead.
So to tell you quickly, right? It's
Yep.
they saw that the sun was affecting the earth and affecting the communication systems. But the trouble is, the scientific community, with their models, with their existing models, they couldn't predict when they were going to happen. Like they only had a certain kind of very short percentage of predictability as to when they were going to happen. But this guy, I can't remember the name of, but if you watch the episodes, you will find out. This scientist came up with a system that was 95% effective in predicting when the solar storms were going to take place, and
Yeah.
it almost never failed. And his system involved, guess what? Geometry in the solar system, the motion of the planets, their position and their tilt, right? Because he saw that according to the tilt, the gravitational forces would affect the sun. So this is a scientific explanation, and in turn, it would impel the sun, kickstart a solar storm,
Coronal injection.
and then
Yeah.
right, and then the implications of the theory are that if the planets in the solar system can influence the sun, and the sun can affect the
Respond. Yeah.
geomagnetic field of the earth, and if brains can generate bioelectricity and are immersed in
Fields.
geomagnetic fields, electromagnetic fields, and these fields are affected by the planets and the sun, they can also affect behavior and emotions. And
And
right there,
emotions
you have the foundation for a scientifically based astrological
and a
system.
con
It's
system
astrology.
and explanation and consciousness shift. So here's the story I'm going to tell you that's about to blow your mind. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Another synchronicity because I saw this yesterday too.
Right.
So I've been keeping up because I'm a big UFO buff, by the way. I don't know if I told you that, but I'm interested in, like, I don't necessarily believe or understand everything, but I would say that I'm very interested and I'm a junkie when it comes to UFO and UAP stories and explanations and things like that. Just how I'm wired up. But anyways, well, there's this other thing that's coming in. I don't know if Avi Loeb's been talking about it.
Avi Loeb,
It's
yeah.
called the AI
The
Atlas.
Harvard professor, yeah.
Yeah, and so they've now discovered a huge anomaly called AI Atlas. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so AI
It's
Atlas
even
now is
faster than
determined.
Oumuamua.
Yeah, it's like 250,000 miles or kilometers per second.
Yeah.
And it's huge. It's either two things. It's either 7 miles large, which is anomalous as hell and almost considered impossible for a comet, even coming from interstellar space. Either that, or it's generating the light from a nuclear fusion within itself, which would have to be artificial. There's no natural system that can produce that much light and
Yeah.
that much energy off it. So
They're
it's either
coming for
just
us.
7 miles. Yeah, it's either 7 miles of self-generated light or it's 7 miles of a huge comet.
Yeah.
Either way, it's an anomaly and it's not supposed to happen. But here's the weird thing. Here's what they discovered last week. It doesn't have a tail. So number one, it's kind of weird. It doesn't have a
That is
tail.
weird.
The other thing is the route that it's taking through our solar system right now is exactly on track towards the sun. It's like exactly through on track to the sun. And the sun has responded to it. We've had the largest coronal storm last week. And guess where the coronal storm went to? It went directly to Atlas. And Atlas sent energy to it. And the two things met.
Wow.
So this guy is saying that if this is an alien or something like that, it's trying to fuck with our consciousness because it's saying that the sun is consciously reacting to Atlas and Atlas is consciously reacting to the sun. They're having some unimaginable conversation
Yeah.
and
Some
it's
type of
doing stuff.
communication. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's purposely just by the way that it's going, that its trajectory, it's going to be totally hidden from humans, totally
Right.
hidden from humans, which is an anomaly. By December 12th, it's going to be the closest to the Earth on December the 12th, but it's going to be hidden behind the sun. So
Wow.
we're not going to be able to see it because the sun's in the way, but it's going to be closest to the Earth. And based on the coronal ejections and based on the energy levels of this thing, it can possibly and probably affect the Earth's magnetic shield, right?
Yeah.
And so they're saying that it could have some implications and possibly, according to Avi Loeb, even be some sort of attack from some alien being. And he's thinking it's probably conservative to look at this interaction with the earth as um, not a good thing, to try to
Yeah.
look at it like it's a bad thing.
Could be
But then this other
malevolent.
guy that I was talking about was saying, no, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think what it's trying to do is it and our sun are teaming up in order to do some sort of consciousness shift on the earth,
Yeah.
because he believes that the sun and magnetic energy in our brains and the way that consciousness works, it's all kind of interrelated.
Yeah.
And he's saying that, if this is true, if everything that he's saying is true, and by the way, this guy is an astronomer, he's a
Yeah.
professional astronomer. And he
Yeah.
says, and this is going to happen. All these anomalies are not, we're not pulling this out of our ass. This is
Yeah.
actually real stuff,
He's
right?
worked for
This
NASA,
is
hasn't he?
real. Yeah, and he's with
Yeah.
that, right, NASA. And he says this stuff is going to be very interesting starting at the end of October to December, culminating December. And he's expecting some sort of consciousness shift to happen, or some event or something. Avi Loeb is predicting it's not going to be a good thing,
Right.
and of course the doubters are saying that it's just an anomaly.
The
But
anxiety is understandable, especially when we've been warned about the dark forest hypothesis
yeah, yeah,
and how it's dangerous to send signals out into space. I think
it's too
Stephen
late.
Hawking also warned us
Mm-hmm.
about this, and
Yeah,
maybe we're paying the price now. Maybe it's coming for us, and yeah,
it's too
it's
late.
gonna,
We've already given our position away,
yeah, and we're
and
vulnerable now to the point
yeah,
where we're going to be completely deceived, and our
yeah.
consciousness is going to be altered, and we're not going to see it coming. We're not going to see what hits us in the end, you know?
I'm hoping that it's a benevolent, kind of a spiritual, positive sort of event, like the guy was saying. But I think you're right. I think it's better to look at things a little more. I don't want to say realistic, but maybe look at things a little more carefully. Be careful,
Definitely.
and
If you
I
hear
mean,
a
not
sound
that
in
there's
the
a whole lot
jungle,
we can do about it, but
yeah, it's better to assume it's a tiger if you hear something in the jungle
right in the right, exactly.
rather
Yeah,
than assume it's something innocuous like the wind, like the
yeah,
rustling of
exactly.
leave. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
those
no,
who
absolutely.
those who assumed it was a tiger had lived to tell the story.
Yeah. But yeah, true. But the thing is, if it's really nefarious, how are we going to defend ourselves? Where are we going to go?
That's what I'm saying. It
We're
really
so
doesn't matter what
primitive,
we
really.
believe about it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like I always keep reminding people we're still just those apes that are just out of the cave just
yeah,
yesterday. Like who says that who says that it's just it has to be whatever these apes think has to be true.
that's right.
That we
Shaved
we
apes
we
on a rock.
determine yeah, we determine what reality is. Like, who gave us that power?
Yeah,
Like, I don't know.
yeah, yeah.
You know?
We'll see.
Anyways, my
We're
man,
about to find
I'm gonna
out.
let you go, Arlindo. I
Yeah,
also
cheers.
have to get
We
off
get
now,
carried away
man.
because it's always interesting the conversations that we have. But yeah, I'm not going
Hell
to
yeah,
upset the
man.
wife any further. But yeah, thanks a lot for coming on the show. And
Yes,
it's
sir.
been interesting. And thank you
Very.
for, inviting me to your show.
Oh
And
yeah, it was just
yeah,
last minute. I didn't even think about it. I know you're coming on the show on my show Saturday,
yeah, yeah,
and
that's right. Yeah,
we're gonna pick a topic because we've talked about. I think we've talked enough about precepts, and we've
definitely.
talked enough about the normal conversations. But maybe we'll tackle a conversation, maybe problem of evil, or come up with
Yeah,
whatever you want. Whatever
yeah.
you think is interesting,
We'll come up
we
with
can
something else.
discuss it.
Yeah, maybe even take it as we
Absolutely,
go along. Yeah,
absolutely,
see where it
absolutely,
takes us.
man.
But yeah, problem of evil or someone made another suggestion. Was it Sophia on Facebook? I can't remember now. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. We'll figure it out. Pretty sure.
Absolutely, my man.
Take care,
Hell yeah.
man.
All right,
And
brother.
once
Nice
again,
talking.
thanks a lot. Yeah,
You
that's
got
it.
it, man. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you.